Chapter 5167. Boom. Walala. Yi Xian threw a punch and the black gold demonic dragon suddenly opened its eyes. In the air, everything instantly returned to normal. However, when Yi Xian's berserk punch pierced through the black gold demon dragon's enormous body, a strange crashing sound rang out. The black gold demonic dragon's body turned into a bubble, collapsed and disappeared. This was not his real body at all. In the blink of an eye, the black gold demonic dragon's body had changed its position, causing Yi Xian's punch to miss. Peace of mind? In the time it takes to close his eyes, everything has been changed in an instant. This is rather interesting. Look at this. Seeing this, Bao Yuan stopped moving. When Yi Xian's voice came out of his mouth, he subconsciously looked to the right. In that direction, a billion miles away, the void was originally empty. However, at this moment, an illusory figure appeared. It was the black gold demonic dragon. Don't waste any more time. This is the strongest ability of the demonic dragon clan. Although you are strong and I can't do anything to you, you can't do anything to me either. If you can't attack me, then no matter how strong your power is, what's the point? As soon as his figure appeared, the black gold demonic dragon's mouth curved into a smug smile. His voice came out with a hint of mockery. Before this attack, he was still a little nervous, but after seeing the effect, he was confident that he was in an invincible position. No matter how strong the master of the magic hall Yi Xian was, even if he couldn't do anything to him, the other party couldn't kill him either. So what was there to be afraid of? That is, even if the other party is unwilling, he will at most try a few more times. After confirming that there is no other way, he will leave in the end. If it was anyone else, then perhaps you might really return empty-handed today. But unfortunately, you've encountered me today. Seeing the black gold demonic dragon's smug expression, Yi Xian curled his lips and said again, "Isn't it just the demonic dragon clan's peace of mind? You speak as if I don't know." In the next moment, the black gold dragon scale suspended in the air above Yi Xian's sea of consciousness suddenly began to spin at an extreme speed, radiating a brilliant light. A dazzling black light spread out from Bao Yuan's body. In the blink of an eye, it appeared behind Bao Yuan. It was also a black gold demonic dragon. Although it was just an energy body, its eyes sparkled with a mysterious power. It directly cancelled out the power of the black gold demonic dragon in the void on the right. Everything happened so suddenly that it was beyond everyone's expectations. The black gold demonic dragon's body shook violently as he gasped in shock. The demonic dragon's bloodline? This is impossible. At this moment he realized that he was in grave danger. How could he deal with the master of the magic hall Yi Xian, now that his mystic dragon bloodline had lost its effect? Brain as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the black gold demonic dragon suddenly lost all his fighting spirit. Without hesitation he turned around and tried to escape. You only want to escape now? Don't you think it's too late? I haven't had my fill yet. Boom. Yi Xian's divine sense voice rang out. At the same time as he punched out, the terrifying aura of a fourth-order mid-stage grand mist instantly enveloped and locked the black gold demonic dragon's body. In the blink of an eye, Bao Yuan was already close to the black gold demonic dragon. An earth-shattering hand-to-hand battle thus began. Screech. In just half an incense stick's worth of time, the black gold demon dragon was unable to hold on any longer. It raised its head and let out a heaven-shaking roar, followed by a demonic dragon swinging its tail. At the same time, it pushed Yi Xian's figure away. Without any hesitation, it turned around and fled into the distance. Fang's battle strength had already declined to the extreme and was about to be exhausted. To Yi Xian, the black gold demonic dragon had lost its value. Boom. Rumble. Bang. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the violent ape no longer hesitated. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he directly teleported behind him. The moment he threw out a punch, an earth-shattering rumbling sound rang out without any suspense. Facing Yi Xian's full-powered punch, the black gold demonic dragon who was trying to escape had no chance of survival at all. In an instant, he met with an inauspicious fate, and his body was completely blown up, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. Huff! The howling of the wind resounded, and an incomparably majestic formless chi whistled out. Before the blood mist formed by the explosion of his body could spread out, Bao Yuan had already waved his hand. The boundless blood mist that was spreading in the air was quickly swept over and sent directly into the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space, where the blood essence condensation began. At the same time, rays of light shot out. They were the Heavenly Nine Great Tao Treasure Liquid, the Heavenly Tao Origin Liquid, and other top-grade cultivation resources in the black gold demonic dragon's body. Now, all of them were taken advantage of by Yi Xian, becoming his additional spoils of war. After half an incense stick's worth of time, the earth-shattering battle ended. In the air, the berserk energy was still wreaking havoc. Yi Xian, who was in the form of a violent ape with a body of tens of thousands of kilometers, had already walked out of the chaotic battlefield. Bao Yuan's face was brimming with an incomparably joyful smile. The cultivation aura that exuded from his body was completely different from before. It was much more powerful than before. This could be said to have not come easy. After this hunt began, Yi Xian fought a shocking bloody battle with the 4 grandest old monsters and killed all of them. Only then did he finally allow the transformation of his soul sea and body after stepping into the Grand Mist realm to rise to a new height under the full force of his full strength. Now he could finally successfully display the 3rd transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation. Of course, the current Yi Xian's true cultivation was still only at the 1st level of the Grand Mist realm. However, after activating the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, his cultivation would reach the 2nd level of the Grand Mist realm. The first transformation was the Grand Mist realm 3rd level. Previously, he could already display the 2nd transformation, so his peak cultivation realm was at the Grand Mist realm 4th level, which was the beginning of the intermediate stage. But, now, after the end of this battle, Yi Xian had successfully used the 9 transformations of the demonic ape's bloodline ability to the 3rd transformation. As a result, his cultivation had also increased by another level. In other words, the current him was already a supreme existence at the 5th step of the Grand Mist realm. Of the 13 Grand Mist old monsters that had appeared on the left bank of the Milky Way in recent years, 7 of them had been killed by him after the black gold demonic dragon had perished. Only 6 of them had survived, which was less than half of them. The 3rd transformation, the Grand Mist realm 5th level? It's still not enough. While muttering, Yi Xian, who was in the form of a violent ape, subconsciously clenched his fists. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and directly tore open a crack in the void. He stepped into it and his huge figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. Next, he would go to a remnant star field and kill the 8th of the 13 Grand Mist old monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way. Boom. After killing the black gold demon dragon, the transformation of Yi Xian's divine soul and physical body after breaking through to the Grand Mist realm was once again pushed to a higher level. He successfully executed the 9 transformations of the demonic ape's bloodline ability to the 3rd transformation. As a result, his peak cultivation base had increased by a level. He had risen from the 4th level of the Grand Mist realm to the 5th level of the Grand Mist realm. The Grand Mist realm 5th level was firmly at the intermediate stage of the Grand Mist realm, but it was still insufficient for Yi Xian. Considering that the first batch of Grand Mist old monsters who had stepped into the Grand Mist realm a million years ago was very likely to be at the advanced stage of the Grand Mist realm, Yi Xian's goal this time was to push the transformation of his divine soul and physical body to the 5th transformation after breaking through to the Grand Mist realm. Under the 5th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability, he would possess the battle prowess of a Grand Mist level 7 expert. Generation. Even if the first batch of Grand Mist old monsters who had stepped into the Grand Mist realm a million years ago included the 8th group of Grand Mist old monsters, Yi Xian's situation wasn't so difficult that he couldn't deal with them. Now he was at the 3rd transformation, the 5th stage of the Grand Mist realm. If he wanted to push the transformation of his divine soul and physical body to the 5th transformation and attain the advanced stage of the Grand Mist realm 7th level, Yi Xian still needed to undergo 2 more transformations. Moreover, there were still 6 Grand Mist old monsters waiting for him to kill. According to Yi Xian's estimations, after continuing to engage in a heaven-shaking battle with these 6 Grand Mist old monsters, he should be able to achieve his goal of experiencing 2 more changes on his current foundation. With this thought in mind, he immediately left the Demon Dragon Forbidden Land and tore open a crack in space, leaving for his next target, the Flourishing Flower Starfield. The Flourishing Flower Starfield was a powerful remnant starfield in the middle section of the left bank, ranked 3rd on the remnant starfield list. Just the Heavenly Tao old monsters alone numbered more than 50. Just over 2 years ago, the ancestor of the Flourishing Flower Starfield, Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, finally broke through and came out of seclusion, becoming one of the 13 Grand Mist old monsters who had emerged in recent years. Now Yi Xian was heading to the Flourishing Flower Starfield to hunt this old monster Magnificent Heaven. However, Yi Xian's real purpose was not to hunt down this old monster Magnificent Heaven. His real purpose was to find this old monster magnificent heaven and fight him to his heart's content, pushing forward the transformation of his divine soul and physical body after breaking through to the Grand Mist realm as much as possible. This after the battle began. When old monster magnificent heaven was seriously injured and unable to fight, Yi Xian would use the final thunderous means to kill him in one fell swoop and then rush to the next destination. Flourishing Flower Starfield. Yes. With a crisp sound of ripping cloth, a deep void crack suddenly appeared in the depths of the Flourishing Flower Starfield. From this void crack, a giant figure of 10 million kilometers in size walked out, emitting a murderous aura. It was none other than Yi Xian, who had just left the Demon Dragon realm half a day ago. As soon as he arrived, Bao Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light and his aura instantly locked onto his target. At the same time, his originally 10 million kilometers in size immediately shrunk to only a few meters in size. After all, old monster Xing Tian was a survivor of the primordial era, and his figure was no different from a human expert. If Yi Xian wanted to engage in a heaven-shaking melee battle with him, his fists would land on his flesh. His enormous figure that was tens of thousands of kilometers long was obviously not suitable. He had to shrink to match his opponent's size. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? At this moment, with the arrival of Yi Xian, the entire green firmament starfield fell silent. All the survivors and masters in the starfield widened their eyes and gasped, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. While, at this moment, old monster magnificent heaven, who was in a giant abandoned star, did not hesitate to raise his head and let out an incomparably mournful roar after realizing the arrival of the murderous aura. A dark light flashed in his eyes as he immediately tried to escape. This king has come from afar, but you are leaving as soon as you see me. Isn't that a bit too unkind? Whoosh! Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light when he saw this scene. Accompanied by an incomparably weak sound of something breaking through the air, his figure instantly disappeared from the spot as he teleported to the side of old monster Xing Tian. Come. Let's fight for 300 rounds. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian had already punched out. Old monster magnificent heaven dodged in horror, but his body was still scraped by the attack, causing him to become impatient. Startled, the bloody battle of the heavens began. Unfortunately, this battle only lasted for about half an incense stick's worth of time before an earth-shattering roar sounded without any suspense. Even though old monster magnificent heaven had used all his skills and used all kinds of methods and treasures, he was still far from being a match for Yi Xian. In just half an incense stick's worth of time, he was already seriously injured. After being injured, he basically had no combat power left, which was equivalent to losing his value to Yi Xian. In this case, there was no need to continue this battle, otherwise it would be a waste of time. When these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian could not help but be a little excited, and his attacks also subconsciously slowed down slightly. It was at this moment that this old man felt that he had caught a glimpse of an opportunity, so without any hesitation he turned around and tried to escape. At this time, you still want to struggle? What's the point? Rumble, bang. After some hesitation, Yi Xian directly used teleportation and appeared behind old monster magnificent heaven in the blink of an eye. Old monster magnificent heaven, who was desperately trying to escape, was scared out of his wits, but there was nothing he could do. He could only watch as Bao Yuan, who had a cold look in his eyes, punched him in the chest. When this punch landed, old monster magnificent heaven instantly encountered an inauspicious situation. His body was completely blown apart, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. It was at this moment that the whistling sound of violent winds resounded, and an incomparably majestic and invisible force whistled out. Before the bloody mist formed by the explosion of old monster Xing Tian's body could spread out, Bao Yuan had already waved his hand at the first possible moment. In the blink of an eye, in an instant, the blood mist that was spreading out in the void was swept over by Yi Xian and sent into the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the space inside the cauldron. At the same time, he also put away a storage magic treasure, which contained old monster magnificent heaven's 9 great Dao treasure liquid, as well as the heavenly Dao origin liquid and other top cultivation resources. This was already the 8th old monster of Grand Mist that Yi Xian had killed on the left bank of the Milky Way. More than half of the 13 old monsters of Grand Mist that had appeared on the left bank in recent years had fallen, and only 5 remained. And, among the 5 surviving old monsters of Grand Mist, the one closest to the Shenghua star field was the primordial Azura of the Azura Forbidden Grounds. Including old monster magnificent heaven, This primordial Azura would be the ninth old monster of Grand Mist to fall at the hands of Yi Xian. Hiss! After killing old monster Magnificent Heaven, a cold light flashed in Bao Yuan's eyes. He didn't waste any more time and directly tore open a crack in space. With a shake of his shoulder, he instantly flashed into the crack and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the beginning of the primordial era, 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods would be born from the 3,000 nests and fill the void. Some of the Chaos Demon gods had the strength of the primordial realm as soon as they were born. They were also known as the Chaos Seeds. They were the hope that the primordial void would carry out again and again in order to find the lost lotus seed and peek into the supreme chaos after the primordial void. This kind of primordial era had probably been experienced countless times. Every time, a different 3,000 Chaos Demon gods would be born. Every time, the 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods that were born after the beginning of the primordial era would open up worlds of varying sizes outside the boundless primordial world and the dark void after they were born. These worlds of different sizes were nurturing different life forms, searching for the supreme chaos after the primordial void. The primordial Azura came from a great world where demons rushed into the sky. It was said that the bloodline of the primordial Yaksha also came from there. Although he had become the second man-made heavenly Tao of the great desolate world, which was the general under the headless infant corpse, he had already reached the peak of the desolate realm countless years ago. However, in fact, the primordial Yaksha was not a native creature of the great desolate world. He was an outsider. Countless years ago, for some reason, he had wandered into the great desolate world. Yi Xian did not know all of this. However, not long ago, when he saw the primordial Azura appear in the vast and endless dark void in front of the left bank, Yi Xian was almost stunned on the spot. At that moment, he thought that the primordial Yaksha had descended. No. Because the primordial Azura and the primordial Yaksha both came from the great world where demons rushed into the sky, the two were very similar in appearance. Both were in the form of a human, but his body was huge, his appearance was ferocious, and he had a pair of huge flesh wings on his back. At that time, after confirming that the primordial Azura was not the primordial Yaksha, Yi Xian was still wary of him. Although the primordial Azura was extremely low-key and his temperament was similar to the primordial Yaksha's and he rarely spoke, Yi Xian suspected that he might have some kind of supreme divine ability similar to the primordial Yaksha's fallen sky Bao. The fallen sky Bao Yi Xian had also mastered the heavenly Bao, so he knew how powerful and terrifying it was. Although he was now a powerful existence at the 5th level of the primordial chaos, the primordial Azura was only at the 1st level of this realm. However, if the primordial Azura really had a supreme divine ability similar to the primordial Yaksha's fallen sky Bao, then this supreme divine ability would definitely be able to cause harm to the current Yi Xian. This kind of threat was not small, so when Yi Xian rushed to the Azura forbidden ground where the primordial Azura was, his vigilance was raised to the extreme. Hiss! With an incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth, a void crack appeared in the dark void of the Azura forbidden ground. A ferocious ape that had shrunk to a height of about 10 feet walked out of it. "You're finally here." The forbidden area was completely silent, but there was a figure sitting cross-legged in the air in front of them. It was the primordial Azura, and when he saw Yi Xian arrive, his eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time he stood up, his body was 30,000 meters tall, and he had a pair of flesh wings on his back. His body emitted an extremely eerie and mysterious aura. It seems that the news of everything that happened in the Fire Elephant Forbidden Ground and Azure Firmament Starfield has already spread. Why didn't you escape? Seeing this scene, Yi Xian understood in his heart and asked with interest. At the same time, his figure, which was originally only around 3 meters tall, also expanded. In the blink of an eye, he was already 30,000 meters tall, and was the same size as the primordial Azura that was hundreds of millions of kilometers away. This was clearly the rhythm of preparing to engage in close combat. "You're really strong. In such a short time, you've already attained the strength of a 5th-order Grand Mist. I'm far from being your opponent." Primordial Azura's voice rang out again in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "However, I advise you not to engage in this battle. I know you have the Heaven's Fall Bao, but the truth is that I have a similar bloodline ability. Once I use it, I can injure or even kill a 5th-rank primordial monarch. Of course, under your fallen sky Bao, I won't be able to escape either. The final result of this battle will definitely be a lose-lose situation. Even if you and I both die, it's really meaningless. What's your relationship with the primordial Yaksha?" Hearing the other party's words, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat and he asked subconsciously. Hearing this, the primordial Azura was stunned. He looked at Yi Xian with a strange expression. then nodded and continued, "His father and I are best friends. Unfortunately he has already fallen. Since then the young Yaksha left the Devil Desire Great World. So that's how it is." After understanding all this, Yi Xian nodded again. "Of the 13 grandest old monsters that have appeared in the left bank in recent years, 8 have already fallen. Apart from you, the remaining 4 will also fall soon. For the sake of the primordial Yaksha, I won't kill you, but you must accompany me in this battle. You and I will not use any divine ability or supreme power, we will only fight with our own cultivation until you are heavily injured." Boom. Rumble. As soon as the words fell, Yi Xian's figure shot out like a meteor, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the primordial Azura. He raised his fist and punched. The latter was still doubtful at first and hesitation flashed in his eyes, but after seeing that Yi Xian really did not use any divine ability or supreme treasures, he obviously believed it. The shocking bloody battle soon exploded in the void. The qi was too violent and chaotic, and the vast void within a radius of 10 billion miles was completely thrown into chaos. After the time it took to burn an incense stick, everything came to a stop. The blood-stained figure of the primordial Azura fell out of the chaotic void. Although he did not die, he was seriously injured and lost the ability to fight again. Yi Xian did not attack him again. For the sake of the primordial Yaksha, he let the primordial Azura go. There are still 4 prey left. As the primordial Azura's figure appeared, Yi Xian's figure also walked out of the chaotic void. His aura was strong and solid and he was not injured at all. Eyes with a flash of light, he murmured like he was sleep-talking. "Among the 4 grandest old monsters, the one closest to the Azura Forbidden Land? It's actually the insect that I hate the most." Hiss. With that last sentence, Yi Xian did not hesitate any longer. With a wave of his hand, he tore open a void crack in front of him and with a shake of his shoulders, he rushed into it and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Primordial Azura had a complicated look in his eyes as he watched Qin Lai's departing figure. However, there was also a trace of excitement in the depths of his eyes. So this is the method he used to rapidly promote the transformation of his divine soul and body after entering the primordial chaos. Although he was seriously injured in this battle, he had gained a lot. It would not be long before he could break through and step into the primordial chaos second order. In this way it could be said that it was a blessing in disguise. Although the primordial Azura was seriously injured in this battle, he had gained a lot. It would not be long before he could break through and step into the primordial chaos second order. In this way it could be said that it was a blessing in disguise. But in fact Yi Xian's gains were even greater. First, although he had killed 8 primordial chaos old monsters in a row before this, he had never fought to his heart's content as he had with the primordial Azura. After this battle, although Yi Xian did not directly promote the transformation of his divine soul and body to the primordial chaos 6th order state after breaking through to the primordial chaos Tao realm, there was only a fine line between it and the primordial chaos 6th order. After leaving the Azura Forbidden Grounds, he did not waste any time and directly went to the next Forbidden Ground. This Supreme Forbidden Grounds was not too far away from the Azura Forbidden Grounds. The strongest person guarding this place was a primordial chaos space bug race expert. Yi Xian directly rushed over after leaving the Azura Forbidden Grounds. Although the primordial chaos space bug's aura was locked down, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Yi Xian and it fought a bloody battle that lasted for a full incense stick's worth of time before ending. Finally, the primordial chaos space bug was killed, and Yi Xian obtained the majestic blood and energy from the explosion of its body and sent it into the flame pool at the bottom of the volcano in Shinnong's treasured cauldron domain to condense blood essence. Thus, along with the large amount of Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid and Heavenly Tao origin liquid, the transformation of his divine soul and body after breaking through to the primordial chaos realm was rapidly pushed forward and he finally reached the 4th order. When Yi Xian left the Supreme Forbidden Grounds where the primordial chaos space bug resided, he had already displayed the 9 transformations Devil Ape bloodline ability to the 4th order. Under the 4th order, Yi Xian's peak cultivation had reached the primordial chaos 6th order. This was the peak of the mid-stage primordial chaos realm, only 1 order away from the late-stage primordial chaos 7th order. With the fall of the primordial chaos space bug, Yi Xian had killed 9 of the 13 primordial chaos old monsters that had appeared in the Milky Way's left bank in recent years. In addition to primordial Azura, who he had severely injured but had spared, there were 10 primordial chaos old monsters. There were still 3 targets left. According to Yi Xian's estimation, after he killed all 3 primordial chaos old monsters, he would display the 9 transformations Devil Ape bloodline ability to the 5th order. Thus, there was at least an 80% chance that he would possess the late-stage primordial chaos realm cultivation of the 7th order. Roar. Hiss. As all this flashed through his mind, Yi Xian's heart was filled with excitement. He raised his head and let out an earth-shattering roar. Then, without stopping, he waved his hand and tore open a void crack in front of him. His figure flashed and he disappeared. The next 2 stops were all in the Remnant Star region, and the place Yi Xian was heading to was called the Eastern Tai Star region. The one overseeing it was a powerful remnant of the Grand Mist realm, called Patriarch Tai Jiang. Half a day later, in the Eastern Tai Star field. Hiss. With a crisp tearing sound, a void crack appeared in the dark void deep in the star field. A ferocious ape, whose body had shrunk to a height of 10 feet, stepped out of it. Master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, you really came. 6th Order Primordial Chaos Realm? How is this possible? With the arrival of Yi Xian, the entire Eastern Tai Star field fell silent in an instant. The survivors on the abandoned stars in the star field were all silent, not even daring to breathe. But on the left side of a huge abandoned star, there were 2 soft exclamations. These 2 soft cries clearly emitted an incomparably powerful aura of the Grand Mist realm, causing a dark light to flash within Yi Xian's eyes. He was rather surprised. But he quickly reacted. Among the 3 remaining primordial chaos old monsters, there were 2 remnant chaos old monsters and 1 star beast. Originally, Yi Xian planned to kill Ancestor Tai Jiang in the Eastern Tai Star field before heading to the next Remnant Star field. But he didn't expect that the remnant chaos old monster guarding the Eastern Tai Star field would actually come here. Moreover, from their conversation just now, it was clear that the 2 of them had already expected Yi Xian's arrival. From this point of view, the reason the 2 of them had gathered together was clearly to get some benefits. Previously, when they were escaping from the vast dark void in front of the left bank, Yi Xian's cultivation was at the 3rd level of the primordial chaos realm, and the 2 of them had supreme trump cards. Although their cultivation was only at the 1st level of the primordial chaos realm, according to their estimates, if the 2 of them joined forces and used all their trump cards, although they still wouldn't be able to do anything to Yi Xian, the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian, similarly the chances of Yi Xian killing them were not high. It could even be said that there was no chance. However, this deduction was based on the fact that the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian was only at the 3rd level of the primordial chaos realm. Although they had recently received news that the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian was wreaking havoc on the left bank, looking for the 10 primordial chaos old monsters that had escaped not long ago, and had already killed several of them. However, in the news that spread, there was no mention of Yi Xian's cultivation at all. Therefore, they didn't know that Yi Xian's cultivation was already at the 6th level of the primordial chaos realm. After all, it had only been less than 10 days since they had escaped. Even if they each possessed an extremely powerful trump card, even if they were to use it with all their might, with their mere cultivation of the 1st level of Grand Mist, facing the 6th level of the Demon Palace Yi Xian, the 2 of them clearly didn't have the slightest chance of survival. They were destined to be killed and die here. Whoosh. Whoosh. It was precisely because of this that when the 2 old fellows saw Yi Xian arrive and felt the terrifying cultivation aura emitted from his body, and after subconsciously crying out in alarm, they were immediately scared out of their wits. Without any hesitation, they turned around and fled in different directions. It's meaningless. Even if you split up and flee today, all of you will die. Rummel. Bam. When the 2 old fellows split up and fled, Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. Following this incomparably cold voice, he directly teleported, and in the blink of an eye, he was already behind the old monster on the left. The old fellow who was trying his best to escape was scared out of his wits, but there was nothing he could do. Before he could react, the incomparably huge fist of the violent ape had already imprinted itself on his back, an explosion rang out in the sky, and the old fellow fell in an instant. His body was completely blown up, and he turned into a bloody mist that spread out. Huff! Before the blood mist formed by the explosion of the old man's body spread out, the violent ape had already waved its hand at the first moment, and the blood mist that was spreading out in the air was quickly swept over by Yi Xian and sent into the central region volcano in the space within the cauldron. At the same time, he also put away a storage magic treasure, which contained the old man's heavenly 9 great Dao treasure liquid, as well as the heavenly Dao origin liquid and other top-grade cultivation resources. However, Yi Xian didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. Although he had killed this old fellow in an instant, there was no great battle. This was not in line with his main goal. There's still one left. This time I can't. Wasted again. Swish, as he muttered to himself, a cold light flashed in the violent ape's eyes. It instantly teleported and chased after him with all its might. Chapter 5168. Half an incense stick of time. Use your strongest attack. If you can hold on for half an incense stick of time in my hands without dying, then today, I will spare your life. Swish. Along with the sound of something tearing through the air, the violent ape, who had shrunk to only a few meters tall, teleported and appeared behind the fleeing old monster on the right. As for this haul, in this half an incense stick of time, I will not use any divine abilities or treasures, and will only use my own cultivation to fight. This is your only chance at survival. Boom! Before he finished speaking, a cold light flashed in the violent ape's eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly threw a punch forward. Roar! Master of the Magic Hall, you've gone too far. In the void in front of him, the strongest expert in the Remnant Star region, Patriarch Tai Jiang, opened his mouth wide. His eyes were about to split open as he raised his head and let out a heaven-shaking roar. Immediately after, he no longer fled. He turned around and took out a supreme treasure to attack Yi Xian. Xian was right, this was indeed his only chance at survival. This Patriarch Tai Jiang was only at the first level of the Grand Mist Realm, while Yi Xian was already at the peak of the middle stage of the 6th level. With just one more step, he would be able to step into the late stage of the 7th level of the Grand Mist Realm. If he didn't agree to Yi Xian's suggestion, then Yi Xian would probably immediately use all sorts of divine abilities and activate all sorts of treasures in his hands to kill him on the spot in an instant. That is, even if he used all his strength and used all his methods to escape, it would be impossible. Appropriate wasn't that the old monster who was just killed like this? On the contrary, although he was only at the first level of the Grand Mist Realm, it was also impossible for him to last an incense stick of time against Yi Xian, who was at the 6th level of the Grand Mist Realm. However, as long as the Master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, kept his promise and did not use any divine abilities or treasures in the next incense stick of time, then he might have a chance at survival even if he used all his strength and used all his divine abilities and treasures. Even if the final result was a serious injury, as long as he did not die at the last moment of the incense stick of time, even if he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, it was completely acceptable. At least he was still alive. If he was alive, then there was hope for recovery, and the dawn of fighting for everything again. As all of this flashed through his mind, Grandmaster Tai Jiang instantly cut off all thoughts of escaping with all his might. He followed Yi Xian's request and turned around to return. He used all sorts of divine abilities and took out all of his treasures. In an instant he fought with Yi Xian, who was in his ape form like a raging fire. Boom! Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth-shaking rumbling sounds continued in the void. The aura of a vast area of 10 billion kilometers was completely chaotic, and even the void was collapsing rapidly. Although the details of the battle could not be seen, the intensity of the battle could be imagined. Unfortunately, old monster Tai Jiang was still too weak. This battle came to an abrupt end a dozen breaths before half an incense stick of time had passed. Even though old monster Tai Jiang had used all his abilities and used all his methods and treasures, he was still far from being a match for Yi Xian. He couldn't hold on for more than half an incense stick of time. Now, with only a dozen breaths left, he was already seriously injured and on the verge of death. Since he was already heavily injured, he naturally didn't have the strength to fight. And in this kind of situation, Yi Xian had undoubtedly lost his value. Very obviously, there was no need to continue this battle. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time for Yi Xian. Rumble, 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 bam. Without any hesitation, the violent ape teleported to old monster Tai Jiang's side. Its eyes revealed a cold glint, and with a wave of its hand, a huge fist landed on his chest. Oni's the fist landed, old monster Tai Jiang, who was already heavily injured and on the verge of death, instantly fell. His body was completely blasted apart, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. Huff! At the same time, an incomparably majestic and invisible force whizzed out, and the sound of a gale whistled through the air. Before the bloody mist formed by the explosion of old monster Tai Jiang's body could spread out, the violent ape had already waved its hand. None the strength chi surged, and the boundless blood mist that was spreading in the air was quickly swept over, and was directly sent into the central region volcano in the cauldron by Yi Xian. Including old monster Tai Jiang's storage magic treasure, he did not waste it either. Inside were the 9 heavenly Great Dao treasure liquid, the heavenly Dao origin liquid, and other top-grade cultivation resources. Just like that, the battle ended. Then after calculating for a moment, of the 13 grandmist old monsters that had appeared on the left bank in the past few years, Yi Xian had killed 11 of them by himself in less than a month's time. This was the result of the primordial Azura who had not been severely injured by him, but had been spared on account of the primordial Yeksha. In other words, Yi Xian only had one target left. After experiencing this battle with old monster Tai Jiang, the transformation of his divine soul and physical body after breaking through to the primordial chaos realm had once again been forcefully pushed forward, and he had taken a huge step forward. Now the final goal of Yi Xian's hunting mission, which was the 5th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability that would allow him to possess the strength of a late-stage 7th Order Grand Mist expert. It was obvious that he was only a hair's breadth away. This caused his spirit to suddenly rise. This thin line of distance was almost negligible. He was certain that after killing the last target, his divine soul and physical body would once again reach a new height in the transformation process. In other words, he would reach the 5th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability. In other words, he would reach the late-stage 7th Order Grand Mist realm. Roar! Hiss! All of this flashed through Yi Xian's mind, and an incomparable surge of excitement flashed through his heart. The violent ape, who was only a few meters tall, raised his head and let out a shocking roar. Then, with a wave of his hand, an incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth rang out. In an instant, a spatial crack appeared in front of him. Swish! With a shake of his head, the violent ape's figure instantly turned into a faint ray of light and directly rushed into the spatial crack, disappearing in the blink of an eye. With this departure, he was rushing to the last forbidden area, and the goal of this trip was the 5th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation, which was the late-stage 7th Order Grand Mist realm. The most powerful being in the last forbidden area was a half-human, half-demon 3-eyed demon god, with a body of 50 million kilometers. It was said that this 3-eyed demon god was the most powerful existence among the 13 grandmist old monsters that had appeared on the left bank of the Milky Way in recent years. It was precisely because of this that Yi Xian deliberately left him for last. After all, in this last battle, his goal was the 5th transformation, which was the late-stage 7th Order Grand Mist realm. If the opponent was too weak, the effect of the battle would be difficult to achieve. Half a day after the sky, the 3-eyed forbidden area. Hiss! With the sound of ripping cloth, a figure stepped out of the spatial crack that suddenly appeared. It was Yi Xian. At this moment he was still in the form of a violent ape. He was a few meters tall, but the cultivation aura that emanated from his body was incomparably majestic and terrifying. Half a day later, the 3-eyed forbidden area. Hiss! With the sound of ripping cloth, a figure stepped out of the spatial crack that suddenly appeared. It was Yi Xian. Here at this moment he was still in the form of a violent ape. He was a few meters tall, but the cultivation aura that emanated from his body was incomparably majestic and terrifying. The entire 3-eyed forbidden area fell silent. In the vast star domain void of the forbidden area, countless fierce beasts in the forbidden area held their breaths at this moment, crawling on the ground and trembling. Yi Xian's cultivation aura was pushed to the extreme at this moment, and as it spread out, it enveloped the entire forbidden area and instantly locked onto the 3-eyed demon god's figure. To Yi Xian's surprise, in just a short period of 10 days, the 3-eyed demon god's cultivation had broken through and stepped into the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm. There had been rumors in the outside world that the 3-eyed demon god was the most powerful of the 13 Grand Mist old monsters that had appeared on the left bank in recent years. It was not without reason. Soon as he was born, his cultivation strength was already close to the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm. When he left the vast and boundless dark void in front of the left bank, his cultivation realm was already on the verge of a breakthrough. Now that he had not seen him for more than 10 days, he did not know what method he used to successfully break through in such a short period of time. No, it was not known. As far as Yi Xian was concerned, this was actually good news. For example, today he was already at the 6th stage Grand Mist realm. No matter how powerful the 3-eyed demon god's cultivation was, there was absolutely no way he could escape from his hands. On the contrary, the stronger the cultivation, the more beneficial it was to Yi Xian's goal of tempering himself through battle. In an instant, he looked forward to the upcoming battle even more. Roar! The Master of Magic Hall, Yi Xian. You are already a 6th stage Grand Mist realm? Rumble! An earth-shattering rumble rang out as a huge abandoned star at the end of the line of sight suddenly exploded. The energy was too violent, and under the devastation the void was rapidly collapsing. Following that, an incomparably deep voice rang out, and a huge figure walked out from the exploding star that was filled with dust and debris. He stood upright, his body was 50 million kilometers long like an ancient giant. He was tall and valiant, and on his huge forehead, there were clearly 3 huge eyes that were arranged side by side, emitting a demonic blue light. Shockingly, it was Yi Xian's last target, the 3-eyed demon god. Here at this time, the 3-eyed demon god's cultivation aura was at the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm, far superior to the previous targets Yi Xian had killed. However, in front of Yi Xian, who was at the 6th stage Grand Mist realm, the 3-eyed demon god was still like an ant. He dared not say that he could easily defeat him, but at least he could completely crush him. It was not a problem at all to kill him with a little effort. Here, because of this, as his figure appeared, the 3-eyed demon god's expression was incomparably solemn. He took large strides and soon stopped in the void 10 billion kilometers away. The 3 huge demon eyes arranged in a row in front of his huge forehead stared closely at Yi Xian, revealing endless fear. It could be seen that he didn't intend to take the initiative to fight, but at the same time he didn't intend to turn around and flee. Because he knew clearly that with his cultivation and strength, even if he fled, it was absolutely impossible for him to escape. The 3-eyed demon was clearly caught between a rock and a hard place. He couldn't win in a fight, but he couldn't escape either. The 3-eyed demon was completely out of ideas. He simply stopped struggling and stood in the void in the distance. He appeared to be extremely passive and decided to act according to the situation. You are smart and your talent is not bad. In such a short time, you actually broke through to the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm. Looking at the 3-eyed demon god opposite him, Yi Xian nodded secretly. He quite admired this guy's calmness, and his talent was indeed very good. Among the 13 Grand Mist old monsters who appeared in the left bank in recent years, he was now the only one who had stepped into the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm. This alone was enough to explain the problem. Seeing that your cultivation is not easy, this king will give you a chance. Half an incense stick of time, you can use all your means, and this king will not use any divine ability or treasure. If you can hold on for half an incense stick of time, this king will spare your life today. Boom, rumble. When the voice fell, Yi Xian did not care whether the other party agreed or not. With a flash of cold light in his eyes, his figure, which was originally only about 10 meters tall, suddenly soared to a height of 50 million kilometers, which was no different from the 3-eyed demon god 10 billion kilometers away. Then he immediately spread his arms and urged the power in his body. His figure rushed out violently and he threw out a punch. Roar. Half an incense stick of time? I will try my best. The 3-eyed demon god seemed to be quite indifferent, and his voice was extremely calm. He raised his head and roared, immediately rushed out, and used his divine ability. In the blink of an eye, he and Yi Xian were engaged in a fierce battle. In the sky, a large area 10 billion kilometers away was instantly plunged into chaos and frenzy. Endless majestic energy raged, and the void was constantly collapsing and mending. This battle was extremely astonishing. Yi Xian did not use his full strength, only his cultivation, and did not use his divine ability or treasure. However, the 3-eyed demon god used all kinds of divine ability and treasures. For a time, the battle between the two was in full swing. Half an incense stick of time passed in a flash, and in the end, the 3-eyed demon god actually managed to resist. He was different from the grandest old monster that Yi Xian had previously killed. After all, he had already stepped into the 2nd stage Grand Mist realm. Although he was now seriously injured, he was not dying and had only lost the ability to fight. Boom! After the last blow, the 3-eyed demon god vomited blood again, but the last moment of the incense stick's time had also passed. Not bad, this battle should end. The violent ape's eyes revealed a look of admiration. It immediately stopped attacking and didn't attack again. However, as Yi Xian's divine sense sounded out, the aura of cultivation that emanated from the violent ape's body once again skyrocketed at this moment. The 5th transformation of the 9-ape transformation. Grand Mist. 7th level. At this moment, after Yi Xian successfully broke through and stepped into the Grand Mist realm, the transformation of his own soul and body was finally pushed to a new height. The 5th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape was successfully displayed, and at this moment he had already stepped into the 7th stage of the Grand Mist realm, becoming a supreme existence in the late stage of the Great Tao. At the same time, in the depths of the Chaos Starfield, hiss! There was a crisp sound of breaking air, and a void crack suddenly appeared in the depths of the starfield without warning. Then a figure stepped out of the crack. This figure was not a space beast but a remnant powerhouse. He wore a green robe and had a long beard that reached his chest. He looked like an immortal. The aura of his cultivation was the same as Yi Xian's when he was in the 5th transformation of the 9-ape transformation. He had reached the terrifying 7th level of the Grand Mist realm, which was the later stage of the Great Tao. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years have passed again. As he walked out, this remnant powerhouse looked around and sighed emotionally. He muttered softly, "This era is about to end and the Milky Way is about to open. I Hong Ke have returned." On this day the entire left bank of the Milky Way was like an earthquake. Countless forbidden lands and star fields were shocked by 2 pieces of news. The left bank was in an uproar. One was that the creator of the 9 heavens Great Tao elixir 1,000,000 years ago, the ancestor of the Chaos Starfield, Hong Ke, had returned. Clang. In the past, Hong Ke was only at the peak of the 9th level of the Great Tao of Heaven, but his attainments in the Tao of Medicine were outstanding on both sides of the Milky Way. He created the 9 heavens Great Tao elixir, which benefited countless Great Tao powerhouses on the left bank. But, after he refined a large amount of the 9 heavens Great Tao elixir, he left. It was said that, like those peak Great Tao powerhouses on the left bank who had obtained enough 9 heavens Great Tao elixir from him, he also left the left bank of the Milky Way and went into seclusion to break through to the supreme primordial chaos. Now, 1,000,000 years had passed. Putting aside the unusual master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, 13 of the peak Great Tao powerhouses on the left bank who had entered seclusion in the past few years had come out. All of them had successfully broken through to the primordial chaos Tao realm. Including Patriarch Hong Ke who had just been born, there were 14 primordial chaos old monsters who had appeared on the left bank of the Milky Way in the past few years. After all, apart from ancestor Hong Ke who had just been born, there were only 2 of the 13 old monsters that had been born a few years ago. One was the primordial Azura, and the other was the 3-eyed demon god. The other 11 primordial chaos old monsters had all been killed by the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, without exception. This was the second piece of news that shook the entire left bank of the Milky Way. The second piece of news was indeed shocking, but the first piece of news, which was the news of Patriarch Hong Ke's birth, was in no way inferior. The birth of just one primordial chaos old monster shouldn't have caused such a huge commotion, but Hong Ke was different. The moment he was born, he already possessed the strength of a primordial chaos 7th level cultivator. This was the late-stage Great Tao realm. And this was definitely his true cultivation realm. It was different from the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, who had attained the primordial chaos 7th level through the use of his heaven-defying bloodline secret technique. Although their battle prowess was the same, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. The moment these 2 pieces of news spread, the entire left bank was shaken. In less than a month, the situation on the left bank had undergone such a shocking change. This was truly unexpected. A month ago, although there were 13 primordial chaos old monsters on the left bank, all of them were only at the primordial chaos 1st level. But now there were only 4 primordial chaos old monsters left on the left bank. But among these 4 primordial chaos old monsters, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, and Patriarch Hong Ke who had just appeared, were all at the late-stage primordial chaos 7th level. Without a doubt, as the countless forbidden areas and star regions on the left bank were in an uproar, this news spread to the right bank of the Milky Way at an astonishing speed. Before long, more than half of the experts on the right bank found out, and the entire 2 banks of the Milky Way were in an uproar. Left bank, right bank, Chaos K-star region. On the left bank of the Milky Way, Chaos K-star region was definitely the focus of everyone's attention. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian's magic hall forbidden area, was on the right bank, so strictly speaking, he couldn't be considered an expert on the left bank. Excluding him, there were only 3 primordial chaos old monsters on the left bank. The primordial chaos old monster and the 3-eyed demon god were only at the early stage primordial chaos 1st level and 2nd level respectively. However, Patriarch Hong Ke who had just appeared, was at the late stage primordial chaos 7th level. RIP. At this time in the dark void tens of billions of miles away from the edge of the Chaos K-star region, an incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth suddenly rang out without warning. Crack. A void crack appeared and a figure walked out of it. It was Yi Xian. If today Yi Xian had already returned to his original appearance as a human, he didn't look any different from an ordinary remnant expert, but the cultivation aura that emanated from his body was incomparably terrifying. He had used the 5th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape's bloodline ability, so the current him was at the 7th step of the late stage of Grand Mist. The battle with the 3-eyed demon god had been half a month ago. If In the past half a month after Yi Xian left the three-eyed forbidden area, he directly went to the vast and boundless void of darkness in front of the left bank. He found a place to go into seclusion, and after consolidating his current cultivation, he rushed over to the Chaos Starfield as soon as he came out of seclusion. Based on his understanding of the 9 heavenly Great Tao elixir, even if Hong Ke had a lot of it, it was impossible for him to soar to the late-stage primordial chaos 7th level in a million years of seclusion. Therefore, Yi Xian suspected that Hong Ke was the first primordial chaos old monster to appear in the past million years. It was very likely that he was an old man from the previous primordial chaos era who had used some method to avoid the detection of the primordial chaos void and forcibly lived from the previous era to this era. Of course, all of this was just Yi Xian's guess, but it didn't matter. As long as he met Hong Ke and asked him face to face, he should be able to solve the doubts in his heart. And this was also the reason why Yi Xian immediately rushed to the Chaos K-Star region after exiting seclusion. Swish! With a weak sound of breaking through the air, Yi Xian activated the power in his body and transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. With his current terrifying cultivation at the 7th level of the primordial chaos realm, a distance of tens of billions of kilometers was nothing. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at the edge of the Chaos K-Star region. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? When they arrived at the edge of the star field, a few figures immediately rushed out from the Chaos Starfield in front of them. They were all old monsters of the heavenly Tao, and the leader's eyes flashed. His expression suddenly changed as he shouted at Yi Xian. This old fellow was the person in charge of the Chaos K-Star region, Hong Tao. Perhaps it was because he had some matters to attend to, but he unexpectedly encountered Yi Xian at the edge of the star region. There were old grudges between them to begin with. Previously, Hong Tao had wanted to scheme against Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had turned the tables on him, leaving him in a terrible state. With his cultivation at the heavenly Tao realm, it was impossible for him to have any confidence when facing Yi Xian, who was a supreme existence at the late stage of the primordial chaos realm. Even if he saw him from afar, he would probably tremble in fear and immediately prostrate on the ground. Now, perhaps it was because Patriarch Hong Ke had returned and also possessed the cultivation of the late stage of Grand Mist, but when Hong Tao suddenly saw Yi Xian, he didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he was filled with confidence as he scolded, "Humph, didn't you say that you were ashamed to be associated with my Hong Ke Starfield? Why did you suddenly come looking for me today? Oh, by the way, you killed quite a number of primordial chaos old monsters. Could it be that you came here today to kill the newly born Patriarch Hong Ke of my Chaos K-Star region as well? This fellow is clearly trying to sow discord. Even though Hong Ke isn't here right now as a late-stage primordial chaos realm expert, he's able to sense everything that's happening outside the Chaos Starfield." That's right. Yi Xian was also well aware of this point. He completely ignored the petty Hong Tao in front of him. A dark light flashed in his eyes as he turned to look at the Chaos K-Star region and said loudly, "Fellow Taoist Hong Ke, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has come specially to visit." Xian completely ignored the petty Hong Tao in front of him. A dark light flashed in his eyes as he turned to look at the Chaos K-Star region and said loudly, "Fellow Taoist Hong Ke, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has come specially to visit." "Yi Xian, the master of the magic hall, I have heard of your name for a long time." As soon as he finished speaking, a voice came from the depths of the Chaos K-Star region in front of him. The voice wasn't loud, but it was clearly heard by the countless experts of the Chaos K-Star region. "Fellow Taoist, please come in and talk. This old man will welcome you in the cave star." Swish! Yi Xian's shoulders shook, and his figure instantly shot out, leaving behind a gloomy Hong Tao and a few heavenly Tao old monsters standing in the void outside the Chaos K-Star region. They were extremely embarrassed. Soon Yi Xian arrived at an abandoned star in the depths of the Chaos K-Star region. He directly entered the star and looked up to see a green-robed old man sitting on a bluestone platform at the peak of a towering mountain. There was a stone table and 2 stone stools on the bluestone platform. One of the stools was empty, and a pot of good tea was boiling on the stone table. The dense steam of the tea gathered above the teapot and did not dissipate. It was like a dragon or a phoenix, and it looked quite stunning. Yi Xian did not stand on ceremony and directly sat down on the stone table opposite Hong Quebec. He raised his hand and picked up the cup of hot tea in front of him, raised his head and drank it. Hong Ke smiled but did not say anything. Yi Xian was too lazy to beat around the bush and directly went to the point. He put down the teacup in his hand and asked, "Fellow Taoist Hong Ke, I have a question in my heart. I wonder if you can solve it?" "Fellow Taoist, you are a guest from afar. Hong Kei picked up the teapot and continued to pour Yi Xian's tea while nodding with a smile. If you have any doubts, this old man will naturally solve them for you. Why don't you tell me? I know a lot about your Nine Heavens Grand Tao treasure liquid. Although it is not bad, it is absolutely impossible for you to step into the 7th rank of the late stage of the primordial chaos realm after 1,000,000 years of closed-door cultivation. Yi Xian nodded, and he paused halfway through his words and took a deep look at Hong Kei before he suddenly changed the topic. It is said that 1,000,000 years ago, there was already the first batch of primordial chaos old monsters besides the 3,000 chaos devil gods. Fellow Taoist is probably one of them, right? Or perhaps, fellow Taoist is actually an even more ancient existence? It seems like fellow Taoist already has a guess in his heart. Right. Hong Kei seemed to have expected Yi Xian's question, and he was not surprised. He nodded and smiled. Fellow Taoist's guess is correct. Besides the 3,000 chaos devil gods that were born at the beginning of this era, there are indeed some even more ancient primordial chaos old monsters from 1,000,000 years ago that do not belong to this era. They are old geezers that have survived since the last primordial chaos era. Actually, there were many primordial chaos old monsters that didn't perish when the last primordial chaos era came to an end. All of them utilized various methods to survive until this primordial chaos era began, and this old man was one of them. However, if one wanted to survive from the end of the last primordial chaos era to this primordial chaos era, then one had to escape the detection of the chaotic green lotus. Otherwise, one would be annihilated. For this reason, all of us old geezers severed our own cultivations. So, even though all of us old geezers survived after this primordial chaos era began, our cultivations and strengths were equivalent to being lost, and we could only start all over again. But even then, compared to the living beings of the various clans that were born in this primordial chaos era, we are old geezers that survived from the last era after all. Even though our cultivations are gone, we haven't lost our memories and experience. So, our cultivation is naturally twice the result with half the effort. It's also because of this that some of us stepped into the primordial chaos realm 1,000,000 years ago, but all of them went into hibernation, waiting for the end of this primordial chaos era to enter the Milky Way and fight for the next primordial chaos era. There are also some who haven't recovered their primordial chaos realm cultivation from the last primordial chaos era until 1,000,000 years ago, such as this old man. However, this old man has also made a breakthrough in the past 1,000,000 years. The reason why I was at the primordial chaos realm 7th level as soon as I was born was all because of my accumulation. In these 1,000,000 years of seclusion, I can be said to have entered the godlike realm. However, now that the Milky Way is about to open, I'm sure those old geezers who have recovered their primordial chaos era cultivation will come out one after another. This is because they definitely won't miss the battle for primordial chaos era before the end of this primordial chaos era. Similar primordial epics have started many times. It's like a cycle of reincarnation, but in fact, every primordial epic ends with the complete annihilation of all worlds. Only a few primordial epics with powerful cultivations and special secret techniques are able to escape the calamity of the primordial epic by sacrificing their own cultivation. Even these old geezers who have lived through 2 primordial eras have only been able to protect themselves from destruction after paying the heavy price of severing their own primordial cultivation under the terrifying calamity of the end of the primordial era. It's simply impossible for them to protect more people. At the end of the last primordial chaos era, a huge star domain was left behind in the primordial chaos great world called the primordial chaos great world created by the primordial chaos great world. Moreover, it's protected by the primordial chaos void. This is unprecedented in every primordial chaos reincarnation era. Just based on this point, we can see how special this primordial chaos era is. Perhaps the legendary supreme chaos after the primordial chaos era will appear in this primordial chaos era. Therefore, us old geezers who have existed since the last primordial chaos era and have been hibernating in this primordial chaos era will definitely think of entering the Milky Way star domain after the Milky Way opens to fight for the destiny of the next primordial chaos era. Because this kind of destiny, in a sense, represents the legendary supreme chaos era that has never appeared in countless primordial chaos reincarnations. Hearing this, Yi Xian fell into deep thought. Actually, Yi Xian had already roughly guessed everything that Hong Kei had said, including the fact that the supreme primal chaos was hidden in the mysterious mother planet of the Milky Way star region. When he saw the primal chaos green lotus and used his primal chaos demon eye to see the evolution of the green lotus seed pod countless years ago, he already had a rough idea of what was going on. Oh, right, there's a person that fellow Taoist Hong Kei should have heard of, but I don't know his background. Do you know? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian suddenly had a flash of inspiration. His eyes shone brightly as he turned to look at Hong Quebec. This person's name is Xing Bo, but in this primordial chaos void, he has another deity. The outside world calls him a guest from the mother planet. So it's him? Hearing this, Hong Ke was stunned. When he looked at Yi Xian, his expression became a little strange. Chapter 5169. A guest from the mother planet? So it's him? When he heard Yi Xian's words, Hong Ke was suddenly stunned. When he looked at him, the expression on his face instantly became a little strange. After a short pause, he continued, "This person is indeed called Xing Bo. It is indeed fitting to call him a guest from the mother planet because he came from the mother planet in the Milky Way star field. However, Xinghua isn't a living being of this primordial era. He's the same as us from the previous primordial era. He's one of the old bastards that I mentioned earlier who severed his own cultivation at the end of the previous primordial era and managed to live until this era as if he was stealing the heavens. This person is extremely talented. In the previous primordial era, he controlled an incomparably huge technological empire. Not only did his cultivation reach the primordial realm, but once the mechanical battle beasts in his hands merged, even the old monsters of primordial era were afraid of him. He even created a mysterious personal technological system that could be implanted into a cultivator's body. With the power of the technological system, he could continuously grow and devour all kinds of energy. It was extremely overbearing and heaven-defying. So, this is the truth of the devouring system. Yi Xian suddenly understood. A look of understanding appeared on his face, and a dark light flashed in his eyes. He muttered softly as if he was sleep-talking. At this moment he finally understood everything. All along he had a feeling that he could not understand the heaven-defying ability of the devouring system and the various mysteries of Xing Bo. It was really too heaven-defying. However, now that he heard Hong Ke's words, the doubts in his heart could be said to be resolved. Since Xing Bo was an old man who cut off his own cultivation at the end of the previous era and lived to this era like stealing the heavens, then everything could be explained. In the previous era, he had already controlled a huge technological empire that even the old monsters of primordial era were afraid of. Although it had already turned into nothingness with the end of the previous primordial era, including Xing Bo's own cultivation, after cutting off his own life to this primordial era, he had also restarted the path of cultivation. After all, the experience and memories of the previous era were still there. As long as he gave a little guidance, it was naturally not a big deal to create a technological school among the humans of the primordial world in this era. Bao including the devouring origin crystal in Yi Xian's body, if there were no accidents, it should be something he brought from the previous era. Its technology was far superior to the technology of the human race in the eldritch world of this era. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand and accept that it could possess such heaven-defying abilities like the interstellar coordinate jump ability. As for the collusion between Xing Bo and the primeval Heaven's Eye, their ultimate goal was to use the primeval Heaven's Eye to help him enter the Milky Way starfield. If there were no accidents, the devouring system in Yi Xian's body should also be one of Xing Bo's arrangements. However, this arrangement had already lost its effect because Yi Xian's cultivation had already entered the primordial realm, far surpassing Xing Bo's. Although the devouring origin crystal that he had spread through the air was still in Yi Xian's body, it could no longer affect Yi Xian in any way. Even if Xing Bo had sensed the aura of this devouring origin crystal and activated the arrangements he had left behind, with Yi Xian's current terrifying cultivation, he would be able to resolve everything in an instant. Instead, he could use this method to counter Xing Bo. All of this flashed through Yi Xian's mind, and the doubts in his heart were all resolved. His mood suddenly became clear and there were no more obstacles. Boom, boom, boom. As they were talking, an earth-shattering boom suddenly came from the void again. The sound was so loud that it made one's hair stand on end. Moreover, it came from a place extremely far away from the primordial starfield. Hong Ke and Yi Xian who were talking were startled at the same time. Then their eyes lit up and they subconsciously turned to look in the direction of this earth-shattering boom. This direction was the direction of the Milky Way starfield. Without a doubt, the source of the boom was that vast and boundless Milky Way starfield that had been shrouded in the power of the primordial void ever since the beginning of this era, and had been unknowingly protecting it. This throbbing had appeared once not long ago. It was because of this that the 10 primordial old monsters who had escaped from the vast darkness in front of the left bank gave up on escaping into the parallel void. In the end they were found one by Yi Xian and killed 8 of them. Only the primordial Azura and the 3-eyed demon god survived. This throbbing meant that the Milky Way starfield that had been unknowingly shrouded in the power of the primordial void was about to open. First, the previous throbbing might have been a reminder. At that time, Yi Xian had already realized that the Milky Way starfield was about to open. However, he never expected that the Milky Way starfield would throb again so soon after. The interval between the two throbbing was so short, and the throbbing this time was obviously more intense. All this was enough to show that the opening of the Milky Way star field was really coming. Perhaps it would happen in the next second, but it was definitely not impossible. Recently, this is the second time the Milky Way star field has pulsated. If there are no accidents, according to this old man's deduction, when the third pulsation comes, it should be when the Milky Way star field opens. Hong Ke withdrew his gaze and looked at Yi Xian with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yi, the Milky Way star field is about to open. I'm afraid this old man won't be able to chat with you anymore. There's not much time left and I have to make some preparations. Moreover, those old bastards who cut off their own cultivation in the last era and lived until this era will definitely come out in the next few days. The situation on both sides of the Milky Way will soon change because of this. Fellow Taoist, you also have a forbidden starfield under your command. Now is the time to go back and make some arrangements. As he spoke, Hong Ke had already stood up. Yi Xian also did the same. They looked deeply at him, slightly cupped their fists and didn't say anything else. Rip! An incomparably clear ripping sound rang out. Yi Xian casually tore open a crack in the void in front of him. With a shake of his shoulders, he instantly rushed into the crack and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Hong Ke was right. Now that the Milky Way was about to open, Yi Xian did indeed need to make some preparations. Compared to Hong Ke and the others, who had already severed their own cultivation since the last primordial era and lived until this era as if they had stolen the heavens, the pressure in Yi Xian's heart was even heavier. The purpose of these old bastards was only to enter the Milky Way starfield and fight for the next era's primordial destiny. However, Yi Xian was different. He had always suspected that the mysterious mother planet in the Milky Way starfield was his hometown. If this was really the case, then Yi Xian's purpose of entering the Milky Way starfield would become even more complicated. Not only did he have to fight for the next era's primordial destiny, but more importantly, he had to protect his mother planet from the invasion of these old bastards. This was a must. Once the Milky Way starfield opened, the first thing Yi Xian had to do was to confirm whether that mysterious mother planet was his hometown. If that was the case, then even if he had to fight all the old bastards who wanted to enter the Milky Way, he would not hesitate. Boom! Rumble! The roar of the sky resounded. More than half of the vast and boundless primordial void could feel it clearly. The movement was too big. The entire Milky Way starfield was slightly trembling. Naturally, there would be such an effect. Recently, this was the second time the Milky Way had throbbed. To be precise, it was not the Milky Way starfield that was throbbing. Instead, it was the invisible shield formed by the power of the primordial law that enveloped the entire Milky Way starfield. Although this shield was invisible, it was incomparably huge. It enveloped the entire Milky Way starfield. Even if a supreme master of the primordial law attacked with all his strength, he would not be able to forcibly break it open. Now that the entire invisible shield was throbbing, it meant that the Milky Way starfield was about to open. This was the second throbbing. If there were no accidents, when the third throbbing came, the Milky Way starfield that had been sealed by this invisible shield for an entire primordial age would open. Everyone was well aware of this. Because of this, along with the throbbing of the Milky Way this time, the countless ominous beasts and experts of the supreme forbidden zones and supreme starfields on both sides of the vast and narrow Milky Way starfield, without exception, almost all of them had their hearts in their throats. Whether it was the ordinary experts with cultivation base below that of supreme masters of the primordial age, or even the heavenly Tao old monster Hong Ke, primordial Azura, and the three-eyed demon god, all of them were eagerly waiting for the Milky Way starfield to open after the third throbbing. The higher-ups of these ominous beasts forbidden zones and the supreme starfield had already begun a vigorous military build-up. Whether it was the ominous beasts forbidden zones or the supreme starfield, all of the experts were ready. As soon as the Milky Way opened, the assembled army would immediately rush into the Milky Way starfield and begin a bloody battle for the primordial age of the next era. On the left bank, in a certain ominous beasts forbidden zone, hiss. Suddenly, there was a crisp tearing sound in the air, and a void crack suddenly appeared without warning. Then a figure rushed out of the crack. It was a starfield ominous beast with a body of 50 million miles. As for the cultivation aura that emanated from his body, not only was it ancient, but it was also extremely powerful. It was a supreme master of the primordial age, and his cultivation base was at the first stage of the primordial age. From this point of view, he should not be the first old monster of the primordial age apart from the 3,000 chaos demon gods at the beginning of the primordial age. Instead, he should be one of the top heavenly Tao old monsters who entered seclusion a million years ago because he had obtained enough 9 heavenly Tao great Tao treasure liquid. No. Whether this old monster of the primordial age was like Hong Kei and Xing Bo, who had entered the Milky Way starfield in advance, and had already existed since the last primordial age. As the last primordial age ended, he severed his cultivation base and lived until this primordial age as if he had stolen the heavens. No one knew. He should have been cultivating in seclusion in a parallel void for a million years. Perhaps he had already broken through and successfully entered the primordial realm, becoming a supreme great Tao cultivator. However, he didn't come out. He had always been in seclusion in the parallel void, stabilizing his cultivation base. But now he must have sensed the second throbbing of the Milky Way. This powerful supreme master of the primordial age finally came out and descended from the parallel void where he was in seclusion. Roar! At this moment, as his figure rushed out of the void crack that suddenly appeared, this powerful old monster of the primordial age immediately raised his head and roared wildly. The pressure in his body spread out, and his divine sense instantly enveloped the entire forbidden star field. His voice was low, but it exuded boundless dominance. After a million years, is the Milky Way finally going to open? This venerable is back. Roar, screech. As the sound of his divine sense resounded, the abandoned stars in the entire forbidden star field instantly responded with shocking roars and violent howls, covering the sky and earth like a tide. These roars and violent howls all revealed a touch of excitement and joy that could not be dispersed. At least a dozen of them revealed a powerful aura of the heavenly Tao. This old monster of the primordial age who had just come out of the parallel void, was the supreme master of this forbidden star field a million years ago. He was also the founder of this forbidden star field. Now that he had finally come out of seclusion after a million years, he had become the supreme master of the primordial age from the peak of the great perfection of the 9th stage. For the countless ferocious beasts in this forbidden star field, this was obviously something worth celebrating. Their forbidden star field finally had an old monster of the primordial age. Soon, the Milky Way would open, and the ferocious beasts of the forbidden star field would be fully mobilized. They would enter the Milky Way to fight for the primordial age of the next era. With a powerful old monster of the primordial age leading the army, the significance was obviously completely different. With this kind of excitement and joy, the countless ferocious beasts in the forbidden land and the abandoned planets, regardless of their cultivation level, including the ordinary ferocious beasts below the almighty realm, the wild beasts, and the dozens of heavenly Tao old monsters without exception, all of them prostrated on the ground and roared excitedly. However, they never stopped. In the middle section of the right bank, in a forbidden star field ruled by a certain supreme master, whoosh, an extremely weak sound of something breaking through the air rang out, and a ray of light shot from the edge of the forbidden star field. Its speed was extremely fast, and even the divine senses of the old monster of the heavenly Tao could not lock onto it. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed into the forbidden star field. This scene alarmed the 2 old monsters of the heavenly Tao in this forbidden star field. Their bodies shook violently, and they rushed out of their respective cave abodes to welcome the ray of light that had just rushed into the forbidden star field. Silver, the right bank of the river, could not be compared to the left bank. When Yi Xian left for the left bank, there were not many old monsters of the heavenly Tao in the forbidden lands and forbidden star fields on the right bank. Namely, even if there would only be 1 or 2 at most. But recently, more and more Heaven's Way old monsters had appeared, and the overall strength of the most powerful forbidden areas and the most powerful star fields on the right bank had been increasing rapidly, as if it was a new day. But, even so, in the entire right bank of the Milky Way, there was still no primordial age great Tao master after the heavenly Tao. Not a single one. Such as, today from the dark void outside this forbidden star field, the one who had turned into a ray of light and rushed into the forbidden star field in the blink of an eye was a supreme primordial age great Tao master. This was a remnant expert, and the cultivation aura emitted from his body was far from the first level of the primordial age. He had reached the 4th level of the primordial age, which was the middle stage of the primordial age. Obviously, this remnant old monster was most likely the same as Hong Quebec. He had existed as early as the last primordial age and had lived until the current primordial age. Whoosh, an incomparably sharp sound rang out. This ray of light was extremely terrifying. In the blink of an eye, it came from outside the Forbidden Star Field. After reaching the depths of the Forbidden Star Field, it abruptly stopped in the void. The old man's figure appeared. He was dressed in a gray robe and had a gray beard. He looked inconspicuous, but the aura of a mid-stage primordial age Great Tao Master was incomparably terrifying. He did not deliberately transform his cultivation into pressure, but it spread out invisibly. With a flash of dark light in his eyes, his divine sense instantly enveloped the entire Forbidden Star Field. Ancestor Hui Chuan? Yes. Ancestor, your cultivation. Congratulations, Ancestor, you have reached the mid-stage primordial age. At this time, the two heavenly Tao old monsters guarding this Forbidden Star Field had already arrived. When they saw the gray-robed remnant, their faces suddenly froze, and then they immediately bowed to the ground. This remnant expert known as Old Monster Hui Chuan was the founder of this Forbidden Star Field, but he had disappeared for countless years. When he left, he already had a late-stage heavenly Tao cultivation base. After millions of years, ever since Hui Chuan left, there had been no news of him. The upper echelons of this Forbidden Star Field originally thought that he had died outside and gradually forgot about him. They did not expect him to suddenly return today. What was even more shocking was his cultivation base. Not only had he broken through the Heavenly Tao realm and stepped into the Primordial Age realm after the Heavenly Tao realm, but he was also far from an ordinary Primordial Age old monster. He actually had a mid-stage Primordial Age 4th stage cultivation base. This was definitely a heaven-shaking joy. Along with the surprised exclamations of the two Heavenly Tao survivors who had prostrated themselves, the entire vast and powerful star field instantly fell silent. But this silence was soon broken. In the void of the star field, on the abandoned stars, countless survivors were cheering and jumping for joy. Their clamor was so loud that even the void was trembling slightly. Indeed, the void was filled with people. They were truly excited, and they had to be. The significance of a primordial age-old monster was enough to make them go wild with joy. Before this, although no primordial age-old monster had appeared on the right bank of the Milky Way, the news of 13 primordial age-old monsters appearing on the left bank of the Milky Way had also spread to the Forbidden Lands and Forbidden Star Fields on the right bank of the Milky Way. Clang! However, the news that the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, had stepped into the primordial age realm and was hunting primordial age-old monsters had not spread here yet. The time was too short, and the two banks were separated by the vast Milky Way. It would take a certain amount of time for the news to spread and transmit. Therefore, the Heavenly Tao's old monsters in the Forbidden Lands and Forbidden Star Fields on the right bank only knew that 13 primordial age-old monsters had appeared on the left bank, and these 13 primordial age-old monsters were only at the first level of primordial age. But, now, the first primordial age-old monster had finally appeared on the right bank, and his cultivation was far from the first level of primordial age. Instead, he had reached the 4th level of primordial age. How could this not make people excited? The first level was only at the early stage of primordial age, while the 4th level was at the middle stage of primordial age. The difference between the two was as great as the difference between heaven and earth. To the right bank of the Milky Way, especially to the remnant star field, the significance of this was simply indescribable. With the leadership of this middle stage primordial age-old monster, once the third throb descended, the Milky Way would open, and they would enter the Milky Way to fight for the next era's primordial age-old monster. Their confidence would be completely different from before. This wasn't an exception, and similar situations occurred from time to time. Following the second throb of the Milky Way, the Heavenly Tao's old monsters and primordial age-old monsters would appear on both sides of the Milky Way from time to time. There was no need to mention the Heavenly Tao's old monster. The primordial age-old monster was now the world of the primordial age-old monsters. The so-called Heavenly Tao's old monster was no longer the main character. Matter in fact, after the second throb of the Milky Way, the number of primordial age-old monsters appearing on both sides of the Milky Way was not small. Most of them were at the early stage of primordial age-old monsters, but it wasn't rare to see primordial age-old monsters at the 4th level and above. Even more so as for those who had surpassed Hong Kei and Yi Xian, they had entered the late stage of primordial age-old monsters, but they weren't at the 7th level of primordial age-old monsters. In a certain forbidden land in the middle section of the Milky Way, roar, rumble, in the deepest part of the Earth-star domain, an earth-shattering roar suddenly rang out without warning. Its might was so strong that it made people tremble in fear. It was only a single roar, but it actually resonated with the vast void that spanned hundreds of billions of miles within the forbidden area, producing earth-shattering rumbles of thunder. Crazy. There was only one roar, but the rumbling sounds produced by the resonance of the void were like a tide, covering the sky and earth, and didn't stop for a long time. Oni figures suddenly appeared from the deepest part of the forbidden land where the roar came from without warning. There wasn't even a crack in the void, but it appeared out of thin air just like that. It was a ferocious beast, and its body was more than 50 million miles long. The cultivation aura emitted from its body was so powerful that it made people's souls tremble. Primordial age-old monster. And it was at the late stage of primordial age. Quasi to be exact, it was at the 8th level of primordial age. This 8th level old monster was a two-headed demonic ape. Its two huge heads were like two huge lumps that were side by side on its shoulders. Its entire body was blood-red and hairless, but it was densely covered with all kinds of obscure rune-like scales. It looked incomparably evil, and its killing intent was monstrous. Roar, roar, screech. With the appearance of this two-headed demonic ape, all the countless forbidden beasts on the abandoned stars in the entire Forbidden Land star domain were prostrated on the ground, their bodies trembling slightly. But it wasn't because of fear but because of excitement. That's right, it was indeed excitement. This two-headed demonic ape was the founder of this fierce beast Forbidden Land. It had disappeared for countless years. Who would have thought that it would appear again today, and its cultivation strength had reached such a terrifying level? This was definitely the most powerful existence on both sides of the Milky Way. Even Patriarch Hong Ke, who had just been born not long ago, and the Demon Palace Master Yi Xian, who was so ferocious that he caused countless beasts to tremble in fear on both sides of the Milky Way, didn't have such strength. Although he was also at the late stage, he was only at the 7th stage of the Grand Mist realm. Roar, the master of the magic hall Yi Xian? He actually possesses the bloodline of the desolate demonic ape, three-headed, six-armed demonic ape true body. With a probe of his divine sense, the two-headed demonic ape instantly understood everything that had happened on the left bank of the Milky Way from the consciousness of some forbidden beasts. His eyes flashed with a dark light as he raised his head and let out a shocking roar. Then his divine sense voice suddenly spread out, enveloping the entire forbidden star field. Countless forbidden beasts heard it clearly. When the Milky Way opens soon, he will definitely appear. At that time, as long as this senior devours him, it is very likely that I will welcome another opportunity to break through. My divine soul and bloodline will evolve again, and I will step into the peak of the Grand Mist 9th level. Roar. It was boiling. On both sides of the vast Milky Way, the countless ferocious beasts and survivors in the most powerful forbidden lands and star regions were seething with excitement. Since the second throbbing of the Milky Way, a large number of heavenly Tao old monsters had appeared one after another in just 1 month. Even the supreme Grand Mist old monsters were no longer rare. Namely, even on the right bank of the Milky Way where Hongmeng wasn't present, since the birth of the first 4th Order Hongmeng old monster a month ago, 66 Hongmeng old monsters had been born. Including the ferocious beasts and survivors, the total number of Hongmeng old monsters had exceeded 40. As for the left bank of the Milky Way, which was much stronger than the right bank, the number of Grand Mist old monsters that had appeared in this 1 month was even more. Including the beasts and survivors, the total number of Grand Mist old monsters was close to 100, in other words, the total number of Grand Mist old monsters on both sides of the Milky Way had reached more than 100. It was simply jaw-dropping. This was a great era. The heavenly Tao old monsters and survivors who had been dormant for countless years had appeared one after another. Their eyes were all fixed on the Milky Way star field, waiting for the third throbbing of the Milky Way. When the Milky Way opened, they would rush forward and enter the Milky Way to start a bloody battle for the Grand Mist luck of the next era. Among the 100 over Grand Mist old monsters, a third of them had reached the late stage of the Grand Mist realm. All of them had existed since the last Grand Mist era, and they were old farts who had lived until the current Grand Mist era. Among them, there were 9 terrifying existences whose cultivation had reached the 8th level of Grand Mist. They were stronger than Hong Ke and Yi Xian. They were both survivors and beasts. But, however, there was not a single peak stage Grand Mist Great Perfection 9th level. Presently, over 100 primordial chaos old monsters resided in over 100 forbidden grounds and star regions on both sides of the Milky Way, and they looked down upon the world. Moreover, the atmosphere in these supreme forbidden grounds and star regions was extremely surging, and all the ferocious beasts and survivors of the star regions were cheering and jumping for joy. At the same time, in the star field of the Magic Hall located on the left bank of the Milky Way, there was also a scene of celebration. For example, today there were only 4 heavenly Tao experts overseeing the star field of the Magic Hall. They were the devourer treasured body, the pig spirit, the emperor beast, and Shi Wanjin. However, in the past few years, the four of them had improved their cultivation. Currently, the devourer treasured body was already at the peak of the heavenly Tao Great Perfection 9th level. Elder the pig spirit had also reached this level. The emperor beast, and Shi Wanjin were slightly weaker, but they were also at the later stage of the heavenly Tao Great Perfection 7th level. Other than these four powerful heavenly Tao experts, there were also many desolate supremacies appearing in the forbidden lands of the Magic Hall, including Zhao Dong, Qian Nan, Sun Shi, Li Bei, Elder Sangji, and other survivors. They were all desolate supremacies now. Even the commander of the Heavenly River Army, Old Devil Mosquito Butcher, Naples, Demon King Mo Wen Tian, Demon King Imperial Uncle, Dark Tortoise Tribe Leader Ming Jiao, Mad Mosquito Emperor, Old Man Shenyuan, Old Man Duanmu, Abbess Bodhi, and other higher-ups of small factions and families had all advanced to the primordial age. In the past few years, the 6 armies of the Magic Hall could be said to have produced many talents. After all, when Yi Xian left, he left behind a large number of supreme cultivation resources such as the 9-colored Great Medicine, Chaos Divine Medicine, and so on. Now, the 6 armies of the Magic Hall had already been assembled. Even the various resources on the abandoned planets had been collected by the various experts in the armies. The entire huge Magic Hall was ready. Once the Milky Way opened, everyone would immediately mobilize and set off. This was what Yi Xian had already told them. This Magic Hall star domain was only a temporary place for them to stay. The final destination was still the Milky Way star domain. At this time, in Yi Xian's cavern star domain, in the black palace that represented the Magic Hall, the 7 beautiful cultivators, the purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, and Zhao Qianru were all gathered together. 7 The great beautiful cultivator had already stepped into the heavenly Tao realm, while the 3 purplish warbler girls were already primordial ancient masters. They were also waiting. Once the Magic Hall army set off and entered the Milky Way star domain, they would be able to meet Yi Xian's original body. According to Master, that mysterious mother planet in the Milky Way star domain is very likely his hometown. Han Kuei looked at the night sky and muttered, "I really want to go and take a look. Master's hometown. I wonder what it looks like." In fact, it wasn't just the Magic Hall star domain. Even the nests where the elite demon army was located were all prepared to set off at any time. Demon among the demon army, Gui Hai Dao, Song Qingyu, and the other commanders were already desolate level elders. The other great beings of the demon race were also universe supremes. As for the 10 million ferocious beasts that followed Pig Demon back then, there were also many great beings. This wasn't even a portion of Yi Xian's strength. It was only a portion that was on the surface. Their true foundation was actually within the nests of the various nests. Back then, Yi Xian had led Shi Wanjin to travel through the endless dark void in front of the right bank of the Milky Way without stopping. Every time, when they arrived at a nest that had been marked with interstellar coordinates, they would send one of their subordinates into the nests and use heaven stealing. Every time, Yi Xian sent many of his subordinates into the nests, including Emperor Seal Lightning Spirit, Mosquito Butcher's original body, Shui Ben, Elephant Fox Mink, Ing Tai, Li Mosquito, Flying Centipede, and Silver G Old Monster, Primordial Porcupine, Primordial Hairy Tortoise, Green Ox, Yu Ling Long, Howling Moon Mastiff, Long Xiang, the Black-Robed Desolate Level Elder, Ming Jiao, Three-Clawed Flood Dragon, Lang Ganglai, Ji Jinghong, Jin Haoyan, Jiao Ri Tian, Medusa, and Lion Badeo. Finally, there were the Ferocious Beast Army, the Blood Flood Dragon, the Green Rock, and the Battle Lion clans, and dozens of others. There were a total of 98 people. In fact, if one were to include his energy clone and the original body of the Mad Mosquito Emperor, who had entered a Source Nest star on his own before him, the number of existences in Yi Xian's camp that had entered the Source Nest star had reached 100. In the boundless primordial void, there were only 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods born in the 3,000 source hives at the beginning of each epoch. Only just Yi Xian's subordinates alone occupied 100 of them. Once these 100 subordinates appeared as the Chaos Demon God, they would possess the terrifying cultivation of the Grand Mist realm as soon as they appeared. And the strongest of the 3,000 Chaos Demon gods, the Strength Demon God, was Yi Xian's Strength Doppelganger. Judging from these foundations, the primordial destiny of the next era belonged to Yi Xian. It would be difficult for anyone to snatch it away from him. There was no one who had the strength to compete with him. Past the opening of the Milky Way was only the end of this primordial era. The next era would begin after the opening of the Milky Way. As for when these 3,000 Chaos Demon gods would be born, it was still unknown. In the blink of an eye, another 2 months passed. On this day the entire vast Milky Way shook violently again. This was the 3rd time it throbbed. On both sides of the vast Milky Way, countless ferocious beasts and experts were breathing rapidly as their bodies shook violently. Chapter 5170. Calculating the time, it had been 3 months since the second throbbing of the Milky Way. In the past 3 months, countless supreme beings, desolate venerables, and heavenly Tao old monsters had appeared in the various ferocious beast forbidden grounds and remnant star fields on both sides of the Milky Way. Even the total number of grand mist old monsters had exceeded 200. During this period of time, the atmosphere on both sides of the Milky Way became more solemn with each passing day. All the experts from all sides were ready. They were eagerly anticipating the opening of the Milky Way after the third throb. Boom. Rumble, rumble, rumble. At this moment, the Milky Way star domain, which had been silent for 3 months after the second throbbing, finally let out an earth-shattering roar. The third throbbing of the Milky Way had finally arrived, and the opening of the Milky Way star domain had finally arrived. At this moment, on both sides of the Milky Way, in the ferocious beast forbidden lands and the remnant star domains, countless powerful figures were breathing rapidly as their bodies shook violently. On the left bank of the Milky Way star domain. Roar, boom, rumble. The roar of a ferocious beast that was so powerful that it made one's hair stand on end suddenly rang out. It came from the depths of the forbidden lands, and it was filled with boundless joy and excitement. There was also an iron-blooded killing intent that spread out. Following, a huge figure charged out from the depths of the Forbidden Star region. It was a powerful ancient beast. Its body was 50 million miles long, and the aura it emitted had reached the 7th level of the primordial chaos realm. It was already at the late stage of the primordial chaos realm. Shortly after the primordial chaos realm, as its figure rushed out, this ferocious beast did not hesitate at all and shot straight toward the edge of the Milky Way. Behind it, a huge army of ferocious beasts followed closely. The Milky Way had opened, and countless ferocious beasts in this forbidden lands moved and gathered together, forming a huge army of ferocious beasts. They followed behind the founder of the Forbidden Lands, who was the rank 7 grand mist old monster in front of them, toward the edge of the Milky Way. There were too many of them. They covered the sky and the earth. Countless ferocious beasts covered a corner of the void. The ones at the front were close to 100 heavenly Tao old monsters, followed closely by desolate supremes and powerful figures. Behind them were even more ordinary ferocious beasts that were below the level of powerful figures. All the ferocious beast forbidden lands and remnant star domains on both sides of the Milky Way were built not far from the two sides of the Milky Way. Now all the ferocious beasts in this forbidden lands had gathered an army and rushed out of the forbidden lands. Soon, under the leadership of this late-stage primordial beast, they arrived at the edge of the Milky Way and lay in wait, in the right section of the right bank in a certain powerful star field. Screech. Whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Along with a soul-shaking roar, a figure shot out from the depths of this powerful star field. After leaving the star field, this figure rushed straight to the edge of the Milky Way ahead. This was the Milky Way galaxy. It was an old geezer of the remnant. He had the bearing of a transcendent being, and the aura emanated from his body was shockingly at the late stage of the primordial realm. However, he wasn't at the 7th stage of the primordial realm, and he was at the 8th stage of the primordial realm. Behind this old geezer of the 8th stage, there were dozens of heavenly Tao masters, as well as an even greater number of desolate venerables and powerful figures. All of them were experts of the remnant people. They all crossed the void with their physical bodies, and their speed was comparable to that of a meteor. They gathered at the edge of the Milky Way ahead. The remnant experts of this powerful star field were also moving in full force. The existences below the level of powerful figures were all riding on various types of battleships, and they gathered in the void to form a huge army of remnant battleships. Soon, this supreme primordial beast of the 8th stage stopped at the edge of the Milky Way. He didn't move forward, but stopped abruptly at one side of the Milky Way. Following, behind him, all the heavenly Tao masters, desolate venerables and powerful figures, as well as the overwhelming number of remnant battleships, also stopped. The throbbing of the Milky Way continued, and the passage into the Milky Way had not yet opened. Although everyone was extremely excited, they were extremely patient, waiting at the edge of the Milky Way. Similar scenes kept happening. With the third throbbing of the Milky Way, almost all the powerful forbidden lands and powerful star fields on both sides of the Milky Way moved in full force. Hongke appeared, standing at the right edge of the left bank of the Milky Way. Behind him was a huge army of remnant experts. The primordial Shura appeared, and so did the three-eyed demon god. Behind the two of them, there was also a huge army of ferocious beasts. including the remnant expert Huizhuan and the double-headed demon ape, who was at the 8th stage of primordial beast and said that he would swallow the master of the magic hall Yi Xian in one gulp, and use it to break through to the 9th stage of primordial beast peak. Without exception, all of them brought their subordinates, ferocious beasts or remnant experts, and gathered on both sides of the Milky Way. Of course, although there were many primordial beasts on both sides of the Milky Way, more than 200 of them, there were even more ferocious beast forbidden lands and remnant experts on both sides of the Milky Way. There were far more than 200 of them. Therefore, in some forbidden lands and star fields, there were no primordial beasts at all, but now they were all in full force. These forces also formed an army of ferocious beasts or remnant experts, and gathered on both sides of the Milky Way. Only, however, the commander at the forefront was not a primordial beast, but a group of heavenly Tao masters. Among them was the Magic Hall's army. The 6 armies of the Magic Hall's forbidden lands had all been dispatched from the Magic Hall's star field. They gathered on the left bank of the Milky Way, and in front of this massive army stood 4 figures. The auras they emitted were all at the heavenly Tao realm: treasure-devouring body, elder pig spirit, Empyrean beast, lion Wanjing. Boom. Rumble. Right on the right bank of the Milky Way, in the dark void in front of the Milky Way's edge, there was suddenly an earth-shattering rumble of thunder. Turning around, they saw an incomparably huge star shooting towards them. This was no ordinary abandoned planet. From its size and certain characteristics, it was likely a nesting planet that gave birth to a chaos fiend celestial. It left the ferocious beasts and remnant experts who were waiting on the right bank of the Milky Way dumbfounded. They believed that a chaos fiend celestial born from a nesting planet was about to be born. Otherwise, how could this nesting planet be so special as though it was alive? In fact, this nesting planet had long been abandoned. It meant that the number of chaos fiend celestials born in this primordial chaos epoch was no longer an integer of 3,000, but 2,999. That's right, this was the nesting planet's base camp under Yi Xian. Table on the surface, it looked like an entire nesting planet was shooting over, but in fact this nesting planet had long been devoured. The one that had transformed into a nesting planet was Yi Xian's gigantic serpent, wild ship. Roar. Screech. Screech. At the same time, in the void in front of the Milky Way's right bank, shocking roars and howls suddenly sounded. A powerful ferocious beast army was charging over with a rumble. The figures leading at the front were surprisingly existences like the void beasts and primordial yakshas. Roar. Screech. Screech. When Yi Xian's nesting planet's base camp shot towards the right bank of the Milky Way's right bank, a shocking roar and howl suddenly sounded in the void in front of the right bank's middle section. This powerful ferocious beast army was charging over with a rumble. The figures leading at the front were existences like the void beasts and primordial yakshas. This ferocious beast army was not small, numbering more than 1,000,000. The weakest one was a mighty figure of the primordial era. There were even quite a number of desolate supremacies. As for the void beasts, the primordial yakshas, the golden divine dragon and the other commanders, their strength had already reached the heavenly Tao realm. Furthermore, they were at the late-stage heavenly Tao realm. This ferocious beast army was the core troops of the headless infant corpse and the primeval heaven's eye that had launched a shocking battle that caused the entire primordial world to collapse. It was unknown where they had been all these years. Now, with the void beasts, the primordial yakshas, and the others breaking through to the heavenly Tao realm with Yi Xian's help, this infant corpse army had finally appeared. 9 days passed in a flash. In these 9 days, the ferocious beast forbidden grounds and the remnant star domains on both sides of the Milky Way were almost completely empty. Putting at a glance, in the void on both sides of the Milky Way, the ferocious beast army and the remnant star army were gathered and waiting for orders. Each of them was extremely huge, almost filling up the entire void on both sides of the vast Milky Way. In front of these ferocious beast army and the remnant star army were either a group of heavenly Tao old monsters or a primordial chaos old monster. They were the commanders of each army. For the past 9 days, the entire vast Milky Way star domain had been throbbing non-stop. The rumbling of thunder shook the world. In fact, it was not the Milky Way star domain that was throbbing. It was impossible for such a vast star domain to be throbbing like this. Really, what was throbbing was the invisible barrier that shrouded the Milky Way star domain and protected the entire star domain. Even the primordial chaos old monster could not forcibly break through the invisible barrier that was formed by the power of the primordial chaos void. Although this barrier was invisible, it was extremely strong. As the opening of the Milky Way approached, its degree of strength was also increasing. When Xing Bo and the headless infant corpse entered the Milky Way star domain one after another by chance using different methods, even the heavenly Tao old monster could not shake this invisible barrier in the slightest. In the end, even if the primordial chaos old monster attacked with all his strength, he could only look at the ocean and sigh. Such as, this powerful barrier was so boundless that it enveloped the entire vast Milky Way star domain. Its power could be imagined from this alone. Now, the entire huge invisible barrier was throbbing. The power of the primordial chaos void was surging, causing a huge movement and terrifying momentum. It was simply able to. The volume was surging, and the invisible barrier formed in the sky above the entire Milky Way vaguely turned into a huge vortex. The power of the primordial chaos void originally existed in the unseen world, invisible and without substance. But now, because the degree of the violent surge of energy was too strong, a translucent giant vortex appeared in the sky above the Milky Way star domain. This giant energy vortex was so huge that it enveloped the entire Milky Way star domain. The majestic and endless vortex was converging toward the center point, and this scene was clearly displayed in the eyes of countless beasts and survivors gathered on both sides of the Milky Way star domain. Everyone held their breaths, but their bodies were trembling slightly. They were too excited. They had waited for endless years, almost as long as the primordial chaos void era, and today the majestic Milky Way where the mysterious mother planet was located was finally about to open. The primordial chaos void era was like a reincarnation cycle. The opening and closing of the primordial chaos void era had played out countless times. But, only in this primordial chaos void era had an unprecedented phenomenon. In this primordial chaos void era, among the countless large and small worlds created by the 3,000 demon gods, when the primordial chaos void era created by the most powerful demon god fell apart due to an unprecedented battle countless years ago, a galaxy was drawn by the power of the primordial chaos void era. It was then guided into the primordial chaos void era, and then protected by the invisible power of the primordial chaos void era. Such a scene had continued until today. There must be a demon in abnormal situations. There had never been such a precedent in any of the previous primordial chaos void era, and this time the power of the primordial chaos void era unexpectedly took the initiative to protect a star domain separated from the collapse of a large world. Just this point alone was enough to make a lot of people think. Because of this, ever since this scene occurred, forbidden lands of ferocious beasts and remnant star domains began to gather on both sides of the galaxy that was firmly protected by the power of the primordial chaos void. After countless years, these countless ferocious beasts and remnant experts who had been waiting in these forbidden lands and star domains finally waited for the moment when this mysterious galaxy opened. Roar! Screech! Screech! Suppressing the excitement in their hearts, some of the ferocious beasts and survivors raised their heads and roared wildly, revealing boundless joy. Somewhere, the eyes of some of the powerful beasts and the strong people of the remnant flashed with ferocious light. During this period of waiting, they looked around from time to time, looking for existences that could pose a threat to them. After entering the Milky Way, they should either be careful or try to kill them. Boom! Rumble! During this process, the throbbing of the entire boundless Milky Way hadn't stopped for a single moment. The rumbling of thunder shook the heavens and the earth, and it could be clearly heard in the entire primordial void. 1. In the blink of an eye, another 9 days had passed. In these last 9 days, although the throbbing of the Milky Way star domain continued and did not stop, the originally earth-shattering rumbling sound of thunder clearly showed signs of stopping. Over the past 9 days, as the rumbling sound of thunder became fainter and fainter, the momentum of the vortex on the entire invisible barrier that shrouded the Milky Way star domain also became weaker and weaker. The entire huge invisible barrier was originally full of vortexes, and as a whole, it was a huge translucent vortex. But now, the surroundings of this giant vortex had gradually stopped, and only in the most central position there was still a vortex eye. This vortex eye was 100 million miles in diameter and was extremely deep, like a passage that led directly to the interior of the Milky Way star domain. The next moment, the throbbing of the Milky Way star domain stopped, and the rumbling sound of thunder completely stopped. The huge Milky Way star domain was still shrouded by the giant barrier, and only in the most central position, there was a vortex eye with a diameter of 100 million miles. There was no doubt that this vortex eye with a diameter of only 100 million miles was the only passage into the Milky Way star domain. Roar! Screech! Roar! With the end of the third throbbing, the Milky Way star domain officially opened, and countless fierce beasts and experts gathered on both sides of the Milky Way star domain were all agitated. Roar! Screech! Roar! with the end of the third throbbing, the Milky Way star domain officially opened, and countless fierce beasts and experts gathered on both sides of the Milky Way star domain were all agitated. Countless fierce beasts roared excitedly, and even the experts all raised their heads and roared fiercely. The more than 200 old monsters of Hongmeng, who were standing in front of the huge legions on both sides of the Milky Way star domain, all activated the cultivation in their bodies at the same time. As soon as the vortex eye in the sky above the Milky Way central domain in front of them completely stabilized, they immediately rushed into it, and entered the Milky Way. They did not know that Xing Bo and the headless infant corpse had already entered the Milky Way star domain in advance, but even so, none of the 200 old monsters of Heavenly Way was willing to wait for even a second more. They'd been waiting for a very long time. Especially those old geezers who'd existed since the last primordial era. They'd severed their own cultivations at the end of the last primordial era. After entering the current primordial era, they'd always been in seclusion, waiting to restart the path of cultivation. In the blink of an eye, a long time had passed quietly. They had finally waited for the Milky Way star domain to open, and the excitement in their hearts was simply indescribable. This primordial era was too special. In any of the previous primordial eras, such a situation had never happened before. After the collapse of a big world called the Untainted Land, a star domain was attracted by the primordial void and condensed into an invisible barrier to protect it with the power of the primordial chaos law. There was always a demon behind the anomaly. After these old farts were shocked to learn of all this, they realized how special and extraordinary the next primordial era that was about to begin after the end of this primordial era was. It was also from then on that they felt extremely lucky that they had encountered a heaven-defying opportunity to witness the opening of the next primordial era. If there were no accidents, the supreme chaos that the primordial void had always been searching for would most likely become a reality in the next primordial era. If this supreme opportunity was obviously in the Milky Way star domain that was protected by the primordial void. Therefore, even though they had been in closed-door cultivation for a long time in this primordial era, they still separated a strand of divine consciousness to closely monitor the changes in the Milky Way star domain. Today, after the third throb, the Milky Way finally opened, and they could enter the Milky Way immediately to compete for the legendary Supreme Chaos opportunity. How could they not be excited? Silver, there was only one river, and the Supreme Chaos opportunity after the primordial chaos was incomparably precious. No one was willing to share it with others. Therefore, after a group of old monsters entered the Milky Way star domain, a bloody battle was inevitable. Everyone was well aware of this. Even Morius, for, in their opinion, even the difference in entering the Milky Way star domain would have an impact on their success rate of obtaining the Supreme Chaos opportunity. The difference in entering the Milky Way star domain was only calculated in seconds. The primordial chaos old monsters' methods were too shocking. For the Milky Way star domain, even a few breaths of time was enough for a primordial chaos existence to do many things in the Milky Way star domain. Therefore, when it came to entering the Milky Way star domain, all the old monsters fought for every second. Those heavenly Tao old monsters under the primordial chaos were not qualified to compete. They could only wait for all the primordial chaos old monsters to enter before entering. However, the 200 or so primordial chaos old monsters who were standing in front of the huge army on both sides of the Milky Way star domain were already prepared. No one would retreat at this time. As long as the whirlpool passage above the central domain stabilized, all the 200 or so primordial chaos old monsters would definitely move and use their full strength to fight for the opportunity to enter the Milky Way star domain first. This moment was about to arrive. At most, it would take a dozen breaths. As the 200 or so primordial chaos old monsters pushed their cultivation to the limit, even the void could feel it. A low resonance sound rang out, and an invisible killing intent enveloped the entire vast Milky Way. Even the heavenly Tao old monsters were trembling. Buzz. It was at this moment, when the 200 or so old monsters of primordial chaos were about to rush out, a low buzzing sound suddenly came from one side of the vortex passage that was about to be completely stabilized in the sky above the central Milky Way domain. This buzzing sound appeared too suddenly. There was no sign beforehand. Even the 200 or so primordial chaos old monsters on both sides of the river were completely caught off guard. They had already extended their divine sense and firmly locked onto the whirlpool passage that was rapidly stabilizing in the sky above the central domain, but they didn't find anything. Originally, everything was normal. Even the 9 supreme existences whose cultivation had reached the 8th level of primordial chaos didn't see any clues. Because of this, when the buzzing sound suddenly appeared, both sides of the Milky Way star domain instantly fell silent. The fierce beasts and experts in the huge army gathered in different areas of both sides of the river subconsciously opened their mouths because of the surprise. Their faces were full of shock and dullness. Even the eyes of the 200-grammist-old freaks nearly popped out of their sockets. They had never thought that there would be an existence who could deceive all of their senses and arrive at the vortex channel in the sky above the central territory of the Milky Way. They were only 10 million miles away and they had been waiting at such a close distance. This figure was Yi Xian. After leaving the Chaos Starfield more than 3 months ago, Yi Xian didn't return to the forbidden area of the Magic Hall located in the left section of the right bank, nor did he go to the Source Nest base camp. Because the Devourer treasured body and Old Pig Spirit were guarding the right bank, he didn't need to worry. What's more, when he left he had already explained everything. Once the opening of the Milky Way star domain was imminent, whether it was the 6 major armies of the Magic Hall or the Source Nest base camp, they would all move in full force and rumble. He found an abandoned star in the dark void in front of the left bank, entered it, and began to cultivate in seclusion. First, after many battles, his bloodline divine ability of the 9 Devil Ape transformation could finally be displayed to the 5th transformation. Because of this, Yi Xian also had the cultivation of the 7th level of primordial chaos. But this was still not enough. According to his deduction, when the Milky Way star domain opened, it was very likely that the 8th level of primordial chaos, or even the 9th level of primordial chaos, would appear. Therefore, with Yi Xian's cultivation, his strength still needed to continue to improve. Even if he didn't reach the 9th level of primordial chaos, he should at least reach the 8th level. He entered the abandoned star to cultivate in seclusion to completely stabilize the cultivation that he had broken through in a short period of time. Then he would look for opportunities to continue breaking through. But what he didn't expect was that after only 3 months had passed and he had just stabilized his cultivation, the 3rd throb of the Milky Way star domain suddenly appeared. Caught off guard, Yi Xian could only rush to the Milky Way star domain and then push the perfect oscillation secret technique to the extreme. First, he hibernated at the side. Then, when the vortex eye above the central domain was about to stabilize, the familiar aura of his hometown came out of it, causing Yi Xian's spirit to shake violently. In a moment of carelessness, his spirit became unstable and his figure appeared. The perfect oscillation secret technique could not only completely hide one's figure, but also perfectly conceal one's aura. Yi Xian had now reached the 7th level of primordial chaos under the 5th transformation of the 9 changes of the demonic ape bloodline ability. When he pushed the perfect oscillation secret technique to the extreme, even a peak primordial chaos expert at the 9th level of primordial chaos wouldn't be able to detect any clues. The reason his figure appeared today was because of Yi Xian himself. When the vortex passage above the central territory of the Milky Way was about to stabilize, the familiar aura of his hometown came out of it and shook his spirit. A moment of carelessness led to the instability of his spiritual power. This was the reason why his figure suddenly appeared with a faint and low buzzing sound. But at this moment, he didn't have the heart to care about this problem. Yi Xian's entire mind was now completely shaken by the rich aura of his hometown coming from the vortex eye thousands of miles in front of him. The Milky Way star domain wasn't small and was extremely vast. The solar system where his hometown was located was merely a very small part of the Milky Way star domain. Even in the solar system, his hometown was very inconspicuous, but it was the only planet in the solar system with life. Face for the entire Milky Way star domain, the blue planet where Yi Xian's hometown was really too insignificant. But even so, in the short moment when the vortex eye appeared and was about to stabilize, Yi Xian was still very sure that the aura emitted by that planet was his hometown that he had been away from for a long time. That was also the mysterious home planet that countless strong people in the primordial chaos void talked about. After knowing about the mysterious home planet, Yi Xian had always suspected that this mysterious home planet in the Milky Way star domain was his hometown. Until now, when he personally felt its aura, Yi Xian was finally sure of this point. He didn't know what the situation on the home planet was like. Which spacetime was it now? Was it the spacetime after he left or had countless years passed? But there was one thing that he was very sure of. The mysterious home planet was his hometown. At this moment he was very excited, but soon Yi Xian's expression suddenly sank. He caught the aura of Xing Bo and the headless infant corpse. Although the entire vast Milky Way star domain was still shrouded and protected by this invisible barrier that was condensed by the power of the primordial chaos void. Only in the sky above the central Milky Way star domain, there was a vortex eye passage with a diameter of 100 million miles that appeared 10 million miles in front of Yi Xian. Even more so as for this vortex eye passage, it hadn't been completely stabilized yet. It still needed a few breaths of time, but Yi Xian was now at the late stage of the 7th-stage primordial chaos void, and in addition to his divine sense, he also had the more mysterious spiritual power. So, just through this vortex eye passage that hadn't been completely stabilized, it was enough for him to sense everything in an instant. When he sensed all this, although Yi Xian's expression suddenly became very gloomy, his heart suddenly relaxed. This was because although Xing Bo had been in the Milky Way star domain for quite some time, he was still wandering outside the solar system and couldn't enter at all. In other words, although he had entered the Milky Way star domain until now, he hadn't set foot on the home planet, so naturally he couldn't harm the creatures on it. The invisible barrier separating the Milky Way galaxy was not just one layer, but 2 layers, one inner and one outer. The outer layer protected the entire Milky Way star domain, and the inner layer protected the solar system. Although Xing Bo had passed through the outer layer and entered the Milky Way star domain, he couldn't pass through the inner layer and enter the solar system. The inner barrier membrane that protected the entire solar system was obviously more solid. Moreover, a vortex channel with a diameter of 100 million miles had appeared in the outer barrier membrane above the central region of the Milky Way. However, the inner barrier membrane that protected the entire solar system was still intact, and no vortex channel had appeared. This made Yi Xian's heart suddenly relax, because at least he didn't need to worry about the ancient planet where his hometown was. It would be fine for a short period of time. Now this primordial chaos era was about to end, and the next primordial chaos era would begin soon. The fate of this era belonged to the Milky Way star domain. The headless infant corpse and Xing Bo had been in the Milky Way star domain for some time, and both of them had obviously gained something. He was not in the same place now, but their gains were obviously not small. Xing Bo was now a powerful existence in the 7th stage of the heavenly Tao. According to Yi Xian's estimation, when he first entered the Milky Way star domain, he should have only been in the 1st stage of the heavenly Tao. To be able to make such progress in such a short period of time, one could see that his good fortune was not small. As for the headless infant corpse, the changes were even greater. His head was no longer in his bosom and had instead grown back onto his neck. His entire aura was no longer overflowing with evil and resentment, and even his head had grown quite a bit. Now he no longer looked like a terrifying infant corpse that caused others to tremble with fear, but instead a pink porcelain doll that was around 4 or 5 years old. As for cultivation strength, the headless infant corpse had also reached the 7th stage of the heavenly Tao, entering the late stage of this realm, which was gratifying. Yi Xian's incomparably powerful divine sense passed through the vortex eye passage that was still stable thousands of miles ahead and entered the Milky Way star domain, capturing the aura of Xing Bo and the headless infant corpse at the same time. The two of them also sensed the aura of Yi Xian's divine sense. At this moment, the headless infant corpse, who was already like a 4 or 5-year-old porcelain doll, raised his head and looked at the sky. There was shock in his eyes, and there was a hint of confusion, as if he couldn't believe it. Xing Bo's aura shook violently, and his expression suddenly changed. They were all 7th stage of the heavenly Tao, but facing Yi Xian, whose cultivation had reached the 7th stage of Hongmeng, the gap between them was like a mighty person or a desolate supremacy-level expert facing a 7th stage of the heavenly Tao realm in the late stage. Moreover, this terrifying divine sense that made them unable to resist clearly revealed Yi Xian's aura. The headless infant corpse was very familiar with it, and Xing Bo also understood something from Yi Xian's devouring system. You and I have a deep affinity. In the beginning I received a lot of help from you, and today I will return the favor. With a flash of light, Yi Xian's divine sense voice sounded, passing through the vortex eye passage and into the Milky Way star domain. It sounded in the ears of the headless infant corpse and Xing Bo. From today onwards, you will be the will of the heavenly Tao of the Milky Way world. That mysterious mother planet is my hometown, and it is in the solar system, and no one is allowed to disturb it. As for the mysterious guest from the mother planet, Xing Bo, at this point a cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He raised his hand and pressed toward the vortex eye passage in front of him. You entered the Milky Way without permission, and you want to steal from the heavens. This world is my hometown, and I will not allow anyone to covet it. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, an earth-shattering roar suddenly sounded in a remote corner of the Milky Way star domain. Xing Bo, whose expression changed drastically, did not have time to react. His entire body exploded in an instant, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out, and then turned into ashes. Chapter 5171. Although the whirlpool passage in the sky above the Milky Way central territory had yet to be completely stabilized, even Hongmeng experts could not personally enter at this time. After all, this whirlpool passage was located in the center of the invisible barrier that enveloped the Milky Way star field, and this barrier was formed by the power of the law of the Hongmeng void. Even though it wasn't stable yet, it was extremely dangerous even for a grand mist powerhouse to barge in. However, Yi Xian was so close to the vortex tunnel, only around 10 million kilometers away. Under such circumstances, his divine sense and mental strength could completely pass through the vortex tunnel that had yet to be completely stabilized and extend into the interior of the Milky Way. Now that he was a late-stage grand mist powerhouse, how powerful was his divine sense and spiritual power? Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, an earth-shattering roar sounded from a remote corner of the Milky Way's star field. Fei Xingbo, whose expression changed drastically, didn't have time to react. His entire body exploded under the crushing pressure of Yi Xian's boundless spiritual power. He turned into a cloud of blood mist and turned into ashes. As for the headless infant corpse, as soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, a low rumble of thunder came from the Milky Way star field. Then there seemed to be an invisible force supporting the headless infant corpse, causing its cultivation to skyrocket at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than a breath's time, the headless infant corpse's original 7th-stage Heavenly Tao cultivation soared to the peak of 9th-stage Heavenly Tao, which was half-step into the primordial void. This scene was like a miracle. It made people think of the 4 words, absolute command. While, generally speaking, the range of influence of this kind of divine ability not only differed according to the cultivation level of the user, but also under certain special circumstances, there were special requirements. With Yi Xian's current 7th-stage primordial void cultivation, if he used the absolute command, it wouldn't be a problem for him to have an effect in a star field. However, the star field the headless infant corpse was in wasn't an ordinary star field. It was the Milky Way star field that was protected by the primordial void's power of law. Even more so, even the next era's primordial void belonged to the Milky Way star field. This is in this kind of environment, even if it was just a small star field, even if a Grand Mist Realm Master used a divine ability like absolute law, it wouldn't have much effect. In reality, Yi Xian hadn't used this ability at all just now. The scene of the headless infant corpse being born surprised him even more. The reason this happened was clearly because of the Milky Way's approval. In other words, the appearance of this scene could almost represent the ownership of the next era's primordial destiny in the Milky Way star sector. Oh God, he was afraid that all of this was at most a guess and had not been confirmed. However, for the 200 or so old monsters on both sides of the Milky Way, it was absolutely unacceptable. He had waited for endless years just to enter the Milky Way star field after it opened and fight for the next era's primordial destiny. This was because it was very likely to represent the legendary supreme chaos opportunity even in the countless primordial reincarnations of the past. But, now, the Milky Way star field had just opened and the vortex passage in the center of the star field had yet to be completely stabilized. Suddenly, a guy jumped out and shamelessly conferred the title of a Heavenly Tao Realm infant corpse that had snuck into the Milky Way star field at some point in time. He actually directly obtained the recognition of the Milky Way star field and the favor of the primordial destiny in the Milky Way star field. It was simply outrageous and infuriating. As these thoughts flashed through their minds, the 200 or so Grand Mist old monsters that were guarding the 2 sides of the Milky Way immediately roared in anger. For a time, the roars and howls resounded endlessly, and the entire vast void on both sides of the Milky Way trembled slightly. Roar. Screech. Screech. Damned fellow, where the hell did this violent ape come from? He just came out and already obtained the ownership of the primordial destiny in the Milky Way star field. What right does he have? Primordial 7th order? He's not weak, but he still doesn't have the qualifications to monopolize the next era's primordial destiny. Don't forget there are still 9 primordial 8th order masters present. Magic Hall Master Yi Xian? You came at the right time, I'm going to devour you. The last sentence came from the mouth of the 2-headed demon ape. Back then he had already said that he wanted to swallow the Demon Palace Master, Yi Xian, who possessed the true body of a 3-headed 6-armed demon ape, and use this to allow his demon ape bloodline to evolve once again, allowing him to reach the peak of the 9th step in one fell swoop. Like this, now that he recognized Yi Xian, he naturally didn't hesitate in the slightest. Before the roar in his mouth had even faded, his enormous figure that was 50 million kilometers long had already approached with a rumbling sound. 2-headed demon ape? You want to devour me? Then let's see if you have the ability. Roar. When he saw this scene, a cold light suddenly flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. As the cold voice of his divine sense faded away, he raised his head and let out a shocking roar, although he was in the form of a violent ape now, he was only about 3 meters tall. Walala. In an instant, along with the violent ape's roar, the sound of water splashing could be heard in the void. Yi Xian's figure collapsed and turned into a sea of blood that spread out, enveloping a corner of the universe and emitting an endless bloody aura. Tight then from 3 different directions of the vast sea of blood, 3 deep roars and vicious howls rang out. Startled in the boundless sea of blood, 3 incomparably huge figures could be seen rising from the ground in an instant. They were Yi Xian's 3 great sea of blood clones. 3 The great sea of blood clearly appeared, and the cultivation aura emitted from his body was all at Hongmeng's 7th stage, but Yi Xian didn't stop there. As his figure condensed, the 3 great sea of blood clones raised their heads and let out a roar. The ultimate form of the 9 Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability, the Devil Ape True Body, was also activated by him at this time. In the blink of an eye, a tremendous power surged out from all 3 devil bodies, roaring like a raging river. An endless ferocious aura surged out from every corner of their bodies. Quick! Their backs merged, and in the blink of an eye, 3 heads and 6 arms. Whoosh! Whoosh! After the body was completed, the violent ape flipped his hands and a ray of light shot out. Accompanied by a faint sound of breaking through the air, the big-headed black stick formed by the Shinong medicinal pestle appeared. It was held upside down by his right hand, and it emitted a monstrous murderous aura. Hualala! In an instant, a ray of light shot out from between the black fog clone's eyebrows, and as the wind rose, it turned into a vast sea of 10-colored flames. In an instant, it condensed to the extreme and turned into a huge 10-colored ribbon. After a few wriggles, it had already wrapped around the black fog clone's body like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. Whoosh! The skeleton clone still didn't use the heaven-falling bow this time. With a flip of his right hand, a blood-black demon blade appeared in his palm. The blade was covered with countless obscure blood patterns, and its shape was incomparably ferocious. It was the withered demon blood blade. Demon the Ape versus the Demon Ape, a shocking battle of the late-stage Hongmeng realm was about to begin. Countless experts on both sides of the river trembled, and they were dazzled. It was a long story, but in fact, it was a matter of life and death. Front in less than a breath of time, although he was in the form of a violent ape, Yi Xian, who was only around 3 feet tall, had already activated the strongest battle state of the Devil Ape's bloodline, the true body of the 3-headed, 6-armed Devil Ape, and displayed it. In the state of the Devil Ape 5th transformation, Yi Xian's peak cultivation was at Hongmeng realm level 7. Moreover, his cultivation was extremely stable and solid, and he wasn't far from Hongmeng realm level 8. After fully activating the 2nd level of the Blood Sea secret technique, the 3 Blood Sea clones that were condensed were all at Hongmeng realm level 8 without exception. For example, today, his true form of the Devil Ape with 3 heads and 6 arms was formed by the fusion of his 3 Blood Sea clones. Although after the fusion the aura emitted from Yi Xian's 3-headed, 6-armed Devil Ape's true body was still at the 7th step of the Grand Mist realm. However, this was formed from the fusion of the 3 Blood Sea clones. Even though it hadn't reached the 8th step, it was already incomparably close to the 8th step of the Grand Mist realm. Just this alone was enough to shock the 2-headed Devil Ape. If it was just an ordinary Hongmeng realm level 7, he might have a chance of suppressing it. However, the 3-headed, 6-armed Devil Ape in front of him was only 1 step away from Hongmeng realm level 8. Even if he fought with all his strength, he would at most have the upper hand. Not to mention devouring it, even suppressing it had become incomparably difficult. Partial Yi Xian still had the big-headed black stick and the withered demon blood blade in his hand. What was even more shocking was the 10-colored ribbon condensed from the 10-colored flames that looked like a starry sky serpent. This was the 10-colored flames. Whether it was in this primordial era or the previous primordial era, it was an existence of legends. Even 9-colored flames were extremely rare, and only one 9-colored flame would occasionally appear in the world during the primordial era. Yet now, a 10-colored ribbon that was condensed from the 10-colored flames of legend had appeared before his eyes. The 9-colored flames could make a heavenly Dao expert feel powerless. But, the legendary 10-colored flames, even the existences after the heavenly Dao would not be willing to touch it lightly. Brain as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the 2-headed Devil Ape was a little stunned. His head buzzed. At this moment he suddenly felt awkward. In the end he had been too confident in his cultivation strength. During this period of time after his birth, although he had heard of the name of the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, he did not deliberately investigate. He did not know that the other party had the legendary 10-colored flames in his hands. Otherwise he would not have jumped out to be the first to speak up. Unfortunately it was too late to say anything now. After all, he was an 8-stage primordial master. On both sides of the vast Milky Way, there were only 9 supremes present. How could he retreat in fear? Roar. Brain, all this flashed through his mind. The two-headed devil ape flew into a rage out of humiliation. He raised his head and roared. The power in his body was pushed to the limit in an instant. In the blink of an eye he approached Yi Xian and punched. You will definitely die in this battle. Shio, Walala. A cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. At the same time the voice of his divine sense sounded, the 10 colored flames wrapped around the black mist avatar like a starry sky serpent instantly shot out. Hua! While the sound of water splashing could be heard as a vast and boundless sea of 10 colored flames traversed the void. In an instant, it transformed into a gigantic 10 colored ball of flames with a diameter of hundreds of billions of kilometers. It instantly enveloped Yi Xian and the two-headed demon ape that was approaching with a punch. Together they enveloped them. At this time, the whirlpool passage hundreds of millions of miles in diameter above the Milky Way central territory had been completely stabilized. They could enter now. When the 200 or so primordial masters on both sides of the Milky Way saw this scene, they were secretly delighted. They planned to immediately take advantage of the bloody battle between Yi Xian and the two-headed devil ape to rush into the whirlpool passage. However, they were obviously thinking too much. This was because the flame wall of the 10-colored ball of flames, which was over 100 billion kilometers in diameter, just happened to block the vortex tunnel that had just been completely stabilized. It was seamless without the slightest gap. Seeing this scene, the 200 or so primordial masters on both sides of the Milky Way who were about to rush out were dumbfounded on the spot. Hong Kei shook his head and smiled bitterly. Primordial Azura and the three-eyed demon, who had once escaped from Yi Xian, had complicated expressions on their faces. No one knew what they were thinking about. But the other primordial masters, after being stunned for a moment, began to roar and scream. They were so angry that they began to curse. Damn guy, he did it on purpose, he definitely did it on purpose. What does this mean? Does he really think that the entire Milky Way is his own territory? Even when he was fighting the two-headed devil ape, he had to seal the whirlpool passage that had just been completely stabilized. This is simply outrageous. The point is that if it were someone else they wouldn't be able to do this even if they wanted to, but he has the legendary 10-colored flame in his hands? This is really F***ket up. The whirlpool passage has been completely stabilized, but we can only watch their bloody battle and can't enter. I feel like I'm about to explode from anger. Roar. Screech. Screech. Boom. Rumble. Along with the earth-shattering roars and screams from both sides of the Milky Way, there was also an earth-shattering roar coming from the 10-colored flame sea. This battle was exactly what Yi Xian wanted. He had been looking for the primordial masters to fight and sharpen himself. Now that he had met a guy who happened to be stronger than him, he was simply the best whetstone. Moreover, with the 10-colored flame sea shrouding him, there was absolutely no way his opponent could escape. As long as the 6th transformation of the demonic ape reached the required level of transformation of the soul and body, Yi Xian would attack with all his strength and kill him with the help of the 10-colored flame. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Yi Xian, who was in the true form of the 3-headed, 6-armed demon ape, suddenly teleported. His huge body, which was 50 million kilometers long, instantly arrived beside the 2-headed demon ape. There was even a 10-colored sea of flames that surrounded it, causing the 2-headed demon ape's body to tremble violently. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light. He raised his right hand and swung the big-headed black stick. A loud noise shook the heavens. The big-headed black stick smashed down without hesitation, landing squarely on the head of the 2-headed devil ape. Not as expected, there was no suspense. In an instant, the 2-headed devil ape's huge body exploded the moment the big-headed black stick fell, turning into a scarlet mist of blood that spread out. Huff! The wind whistled as the black mist avatar waved his hand, and a majestic invisible force whizzed out. Flame, the majestic blood mist that was spreading out from the ball, was quickly swept up and sent directly to the bottom of the central domain volcano in the space inside the cauldron, where the blood essence condensation began. Division. In addition, as the 2-headed devil ape's body exploded, a large amount of Heavenly 9 Great Tao Treasure liquid, Heavenly Law Origin liquid, and other top cultivation resources fell and were directly absorbed by Yi Xian with a wave of his hand. Whoosh, walala. In less than an incense stick's worth of time, this earth-shattering battle came to an end. Double the 2-headed devil ape was killed, and its body exploded into a bloody mist, becoming the raw material for Yi Xian to condense the primordial blood essence. Even the top cultivation resources such as the Heavenly Nine Great Tao Treasure Liquid and Heavenly Law Origin Liquid in its hands were taken by Yi Xian and absorbed into his body. After all this, Yi Xian waved his hand, and this huge 10-colored flame ball with a diameter of 100 billion miles collapsed in an instant amidst the earth-shattering sound of flames. Then, it shrank to the extreme and turned back into a 10-colored ribbon, like a mottled starry sky python. After a few twists, it had already reached the body of the Black Mist Avatar. At the same time, Yi Xian, who was in the true form of a three-headed six-armed demon god, also appeared in the void. He stood in front of the vortex tunnel that had a diameter of 100 million miles and had been completely stabilized an incense stick's worth of time ago. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he looked around. At this time, the cultivation aura emanating from his body was clearly, completely different from before the battle began. After this battle, Yi Xian's divine soul and physical transformation process after breaking through to the primordial realm had once again reached a higher level. When the two-headed devil ape died, he had actually used the sixth transformation of the 9 devil ape transformation bloodline ability. Otherwise, even if the 10-colored flames suddenly swept over and caught the two-headed devil ape transformation bloodline off guard, he would not have been able to kill it so easily. First, in the 5th transformation state, Yi Xian's peak cultivation was at the 7th level of the primordial realm. For example, now that he had used the 6th transformation of the 9 devil ape transformation bloodline ability, Yi Xian's peak cultivation had soared to the 8th level of the primordial realm. Moreover, the power of the second layer of the Blood Sea secret technique was fully activated, and the 3 Blood Sea avatars were all at the 8th level of the primordial realm without exception. While his three-headed, six-armed devil ape transformation was formed by the 3 Blood Sea avatars gathered together and combined. Therefore, the aura emitted by Yi Xian's three-headed, six-armed devil ape true body had already reached the 8th step of the Grand Mist realm. After all, the devil ape transformation was formed by the combination of the 3 Blood Sea avatars. After the combination of the 3 8th-level avatars, the devil ape transformation's cultivation base was extremely close to the 9th level of the primordial realm even though it had not reached the 9th level yet. Previously, among the 200 or so primordial realm old monsters that stood in front of the huge army on both sides of the Milky Way, there were a total of 9 8th-level Grand Mist old monsters, including the two-headed devil ape. Since the two-headed devil ape transformation had been killed, but Yi Xian's strength had soared because of this battle, leaping to a new 8th-level powerhouse. Therefore, there were still 9 8th-level old monsters on both sides of the Milky Way. However, among these 9 8th-level old monsters, the three-headed, six-armed devil ape transformation formed by the combination of the 3 Blood Sea avatars was definitely the most powerful existence. One before the battle, there were still 9 8th-level Grand Mist old monsters that were stronger than Yi Xian. While, after this battle, not only did Yi Xian possess the strength of a 8th-level Grand Mist old monster, but he was also stronger than the other 8 8th-level Grand Mist old monsters. This change was simply too unexpected. When Yi Xian's three-headed, six-armed figure appeared, the countless experts on both sides of the Milky Way were dumbfounded when they felt the terrifying aura from his body. They suspected that they were in a dream. Everything was so unreal. The mysterious mother planet in the Milky Way star field is this Lord's hometown, so this Lord will not allow anyone to covet the Milky Way star field. Everyone go back where you came from, all of you, disperse. Looking around, the 3 devil avatars' eyes flashed with a blazing cold light. At the same time, Yi Xian's divine sense voice rang out. Cage, it covered the entire 2 sides of the Milky Way, revealing endless arrogance and tyranny. If you don't want to disperse, it's fine to stay and watch from afar. This Lord will not interfere. However, if anyone dares to trespass into the vortex channel, don't blame this Lord for killing without mercy. Rumble? This. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian activated the power of his cultivation within his body, transforming it into an invisible pressure that spread out. It was because of shock. For a moment, rumbling sounds of thunder resounded in the air as if they were resonating with each other. Their might was shocking to the extreme. In the huge armies gathered on both sides of the Milky Way, countless experts gasped. Their expressions changed drastically, but they did not dare to say anything. Not to mention the powerful figures in Huangzun, even the Heavenly Tao's old monsters had their faces flushed red. They were panting heavily, but they did not dare to even let out a fart. On the right bank, the giant life plug of the Wild Dragon battleship, which stood at the edge of the Milky Way in the form of a huge nesting star, trembled slightly. It seemed that even the self-derived world worms that formed the wild dragon battleship were excited at this moment. In the 6 armies of the Magic Hall's camp, countless experts were so excited that their bodies were trembling. In front of the Black Palace in the center of the 6 armies, the 7 beautiful cultivators, the purplish warbler, Duanmu Xiaocha, Zhao Qianru, and the rest of the girls were flushed. Their eyes were shining brightly. As for the 4 heavenly Dao realm commanders at the front of the Magic Hall's army, the Emperor Beast and the devouring treasured body were indifferent. This was because they were originally one with Yi Xian. To them, Yi Xian's current arrogance was nothing to be excited about. That was them. As for Pig Spirit and Shi Wanjin, they had proud looks on their faces. Shi Wanjin was a little better as he was more composed, but Pig Spirit looked like he had been injected with chicken blood. He paced around in the void as his eyes shimmered. From time to time he would look at the primordial chaos freaks in front of the various armies. At this moment Yi Xian was guarding the entrance by himself, causing him to have an uncontrollable impulse. He was simply too handsome. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many grandmist old monsters eyeing him covetously, this old fellow would have already rushed out and pretended to fly together with Yi Xian. In the Infant Corpse Legion, the Void Gigantic Turtle, Primordial Yakshas, Golden Divine Dragon, and the other Heavenly Dao Realm commanders had complicated looks in their eyes. The mighty figures and desolate supremacies in the Legion had odd looks on their faces. They had long heard of the fame of the Magic Hall's Lord Yi Xian. They also knew of his relationship with the Infant Corpse Legion. When they saw Yi Xian confer the Infant Corpse Legion with the Milky Way Heavenly Dao, they were filled with curiosity. As for the 200-plus powerful primordial chaos freaks, their expressions turned even more interesting when they heard Yi Xian's words. Hong Kei shook his head with a wry smile. Primordial Shura and the 3-eyed demon god had mixed expressions. As for the other primordial chaos freaks, although they were infuriated, their cultivation levels were inferior to Yi Xian's, so they did not have the face to reprimand him. Only the 8 8th-stage primordial chaos freaks who had the same cultivation level as Yi Xian, raised their heads and roared incessantly, "Roar! You really don't know what's good for you. How dare you tell all of us to retreat? Did he really think that he could hold out against 10,000 men by himself? Don't forget that you're facing the power of the entire primordial chaos realm. Just the primordial chaos freaks alone number over 200. No need for nonsense. Fellow Taoists, let's attack together and kill him first. Roar! Screech! Did he really think that he could hold out against 10,000 men by himself? Don't forget that you're facing the power of the entire primordial chaos realm. Just the primordial chaos freaks alone number over 200. No need for nonsense. Fellow Taoists, let's attack together and kill him first. Roar! Screech! Following Yi Xian's words, the 8 old fellows who were at the same level as him and had also reached the 8th level of the Grand Mist realm, were enraged. As they roared, they no longer hesitated and rushed out at the same time. Boom! Rumble! Among the 8 old freaks there were 4 remnant powerhouses and 4 space beasts. The former was fine, but the latter was extremely huge, spanning over 50 million miles. Currently, the 8 of them were charging towards Yi Xian from 8 different directions. All of their cultivations were pushed to the limit, and the 4 old monsters directly took out the treasures in their hands. In an instant, an earth-shattering rumbling sound came from the air. The power was violent, and the aura was vast and majestic. It was unprecedented. After all, these were 8 powerful late-stage primordial chaos freaks. Moreover, they weren't at the 7th stage but the 8th stage. They were only 1 stage away from the peak of the 9th stage primordial chaos realm. 8. The scene of such powerful beings attacking at the same time was too frightening. In the blink of an eye, the vast void within 1 trillion miles was completely thrown into chaos with the vortex hole at the center of the central galaxy as the center point. Since you're courting death, then I'll do as you wish today. Roar! Kacha! 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 Almost at the same time, the 3-headed, 6-armed Yi Xian emitted an incomparably cold divine sense. He raised his head and roared, then instantly flashed forward to meet the 8 old monsters of the 8th step. Black a bloody light flashed in the eyes of the mist doppelganger, and the spiritual lightning technique was activated. Amidst the earth-shattering crackling sounds, blood-red lightning appeared above the heads of the 8 old freaks. Suddenly, caught off guard, they were directly submerged in the lightning. The spiritual lightning technique was too strange, its speed was too fast, and there was no sign of it beforehand. It accompanied Yi Xian as he grew up, and now Yi Xian already possessed a terrifying battle prowess at the 8th level of Grand Mist. When the same spiritual lightning technique was used in his hands, the difference in power was like heaven and earth. The 8 old freaks were caught off guard. Their entire bodies were enveloped by the sea of lightning formed by the explosion of the spiritual lightning technique. Although it wasn't fatal and didn't even cause them serious injuries, minor injuries were inevitable. In an instant they saw stars in front of their eyes. Their heads were buzzing and they were dizzy. Shio. Walala, taking advantage of this time, the 10-colored ribbon that was wrapped around the body of the black fog like a giant serpent in space also shot out at a shocking speed. As it soared in the wind, it instantly turned into a vast sea of 10-colored flames. Under the control of Yi Xian's divine sense, this sea of flames was clearly alive. Accompanied by the strange sound of splashing water, the entire 10-colored sea of flames expanded in an instant, transforming into an enormous 10-colored ball of flames with a diameter of 500 billion kilometers. It enveloped Yi Xian and the 8 old monsters of the 8th step who were still buzzing in their heads within it. This matter. In fact, taking advantage of the time when the 8 old freaks were in a state of confusion, Yi Xian could have used the 10-colored flames to directly kill them. The power of the 10-colored flames was too strong. Under normal circumstances, the 8 old freaks might have been able to dodge, but in this state of confusion, it was basically impossible. However, Yi Xian didn't do so because he felt that it was too wasteful. For example, today he had only displayed the 6th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, and there was still a certain distance to the 7th transformation. He could take advantage of this opportunity to fight with these 8 old freaks and push the transformation of his divine soul and body to a higher level after breaking through to the primordial chaos realm, smoothly displaying the 7th transformation. Part 1 under the 6th transformation, his current peak cultivation was at the 8th stage of the primordial chaos realm. If he could successfully display the 7th transformation, then Yi Xian's cultivation would soar again, reaching the peak of the primordial chaos realm. At that time he would be completely fearless and would be able to run rampant in the vast primordial chaos realm. Boom! Awoo! With the formation of the 10-colored fireball, the 8 old freaks were all trapped in the fireball, and there was no way for them to escape. Yi Xian's heart suddenly relaxed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. No. There was no need to hesitate anymore. The 3-headed, 6-armed Yi Xian immediately rushed forward. The violent ape's eyes flashed with a bloody light, and he directly swung the big-headed black stick, smashing one of the old freaks away. This was obviously a survivor of the primordial chaos realm, but under the intense pain, he let out a mournful howl, and it was enough to make one cry, screech. At the same time, the withered demon blood blade in the hand of the skeleton avatar was also unleashed. With a slash, a Class 8 dire beast that was 10 billion miles away had a leg chopped off in an instant. Blood splattered all over the void, and an earth-shattering roar suddenly rang out. What? He actually cast the 10-colored fireball to trap us in it? He clearly had the opportunity to kill us with the 10-colored fireball, but he didn't do so. This demonic ape is too arrogant. There's no need to say more. Now that there's no way back, it's just the right time to fight him. There's no suspense. In this battle either he dies or we die. After waiting for countless years, if we can't enter the Milky Way even if we live, we won't have the opportunity to improve. Roar. Screech. Screech. At this time the 8 8th order old monsters finally recovered from the confusion caused by the first spiritual lightning technique. After regaining their clarity, they immediately saw the situation around them. Their expressions changed greatly and they all became furious, roaring loudly, "You are right. In this battle you have no chance of survival. Sooner or later you will die." Facing all of this, the eyes of the 3 great clones of the devil ape flashed with a cold light. Yi Xian's incomparably cold divine sense sounded out as well, resounding throughout the entire flame sphere, revealing an endless sense of disdain. But before I fall, I still have to be a stepping stone for this hall to reach the great perfection of the 9th step of the Grand Mist Realm. In any case, thank you. Rumble. As the voice of the divine sense faded, the demonic ape raised its head and roared. It swung the big-headed black stick high and smashed it on the body of a level 8 survivor. Compared to the gigantic big-headed black cudgel, the figure of this 8th order survivor was like an ant. As the big-headed black cudgel smashed down, the boundless and terrifying power rushed into his body. After a series of thunderous rumbles, there was an earth-shattering explosion, and a cloud of blood mist spread out in the void. With just one blow, a powerful level 8 survivor died. His body directly exploded and was collected by Yi Xian. Even the storage magic treasure that fell out of his body was the same. Chapter 5172. With just one blow, a powerful rank 8 survivor had fallen. His body directly exploded and was collected by Yi Xian. Even the storage magic treasure that fell out of his body was the same. This scene was too shocking and it was simply terrifying, but it was only the beginning of this earth-shattering battle. Roar. Rumble. While Yi Xian killed this rank 8 survivor with a single strike of his staff, waved his hand and put away the blood mist that formed from the explosion of his body, as well as the treasures that fell out, a Class 8 ferocious beast roared as it charged over from the right. It directly attacked and threw a punch over. The energy was too violent. Yi Xian dodged sideways, but he was still grazed by it. Immediately he felt his blood boil. After all, the opponent was also a rank 8 old monster and was not much weaker than him. It was only natural that his blood and chi would be disturbed by a full-powered blow. These thoughts flashed through Yi Xian's mind and he instantly became angry. Without hesitation, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the skeleton avatar, and the huge withered demon blood blade instantly slashed out. The power of this blow was too ferocious and demonic. The head of the Class 8 ferocious beast was directly cut off. Then, the raging ape spread its left arm and directly blasted out a punch, blowing up the remains of the ferocious beast along with the huge head that rose into the sky. Whoosh! The sound of the wind whistling suddenly rang out. The black mist avatar waved his hand, and a majestic invisible force roared out, sweeping the majestic blood mist that was spreading out and directly sending it to the bottom of the central region volcano in the space inside the cauldron to start the blood essence condensation. At the same time, some top cultivation resources such as the Heavenly 9 Great Tao Elixir and the Heavenly Path Origin Liquid fell out of the rank 8 Dire Beast's body and were also collected by the Black Mist Avatar. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 8 rank 8 old monsters had fallen, and there were only 6 left. Everything happened too quickly and they were completely caught off guard. By the time they reacted, the 6 surviving rank 8 old monsters trembled violently as they realized that something was wrong. This was the birth of a true demon god. Even though they were also late-stage existences of the 8th stage of the Grand Mist realm, if they were to fight one-on-one, none of them would be able to last 3 rounds against the other. This was the first time a true demon god had appeared. Even though they were also late-stage existences of the 8th stage of the Grand Mist realm, if they were to fight one-on-one, none of them would be able to last 3 rounds against the other. It was simply a crushing defeat. Although the other party's cultivation base was only at rank 8 Grand Mist, his true combat strength was not much different from a rank 9 Grand Mist peak Grand Mist existence. Against such an opponent, there were only 6 of them. Even if they used all their strength they would not have much hope. These thoughts flashed through their minds and the 6 rank 8 old monsters hesitated. Their eyes flickered, and if it wasn't for the huge fireball formed by the 10-colored sea of flames, one of them would have turned tail and fled. What they said earlier about not being able to enter the Milky Way was just a pretense. When a true life and death crisis arrived, who wouldn't want to fight for that slim chance of survival? Even the Grand Mist old monster was not exempt from this custom. What? Are you regretting it so quickly? Seeing this scene, Yi Xian seemed to have guessed the changes in the 6 rank 8 old monster's thoughts. The Devil Ape's 3 avatars revealed a look of disdain, and Yi Xian's incomparably cold voice rang out at this moment. It was filled with endless mockery and determination. Unfortunately, it's all too late. Today, all of you are destined to fall here one by one and become stepping stones for this hall to enter rank 9 Grand Mist Peak. Boom. Rumble. Crack. As soon as the voice fell, the eyes of the Black Mist Avatar flashed with a bloody light, and the spiritual thunder lightning technique was fully activated once again. A boundless sea of blood-colored lightning appeared above the head of a rank 8 old monster and exploded, instantly drowning his body. This was only enough to seriously injure him, but right after, Yi Xian had already rushed forward. The violent ape's right arm spread out and smashed the rank 8 old monster with all its might, directly smashing the rank 8 old monster into a bloody mist. Even the treasures that fell out of his body were taken away by Yi Xian. Bang! Rumble. With the 3 rank 8 old monsters killed, the remaining 5 old monsters became anxious. They seemed to have seen the scene of 5 people being killed one after another, and it wasn't far away and it was about to happen. Rather than that, it was better to take advantage of this opportunity to attack with all their might. Perhaps they could still fight for a chance of survival. With these thoughts flashing through their minds, the 5 old monsters no longer hesitated, nor did they hold back in the slightest. All of them attacked with all their might, and in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived around Yi Xian. Each of them used their most powerful techniques to besiege him. Although Yi Xian currently had 3 heads and 6 arms, there were 5 people attacking him at the same time. Although their battle prowess was inferior to his, their cultivation was still at the same level of the 8th stage of the Grand Mist realm. Moreover, these 5 powerful Stage 8 old monsters were clearly ready to go all out. They didn't hold back at all, so their combat strength was naturally even more powerful. Could even be said that they were at the same level. Faced in this situation, even Yi Xian was caught off guard and struck a few times. Shocking bangs continuously resounded. The blood and chi of the devil ape's 3 clones surged, and a mouthful of fishy sweetness reached their throats. They almost turned into arrows of blood and spurted out, roar, hiss. Under the joint attack, Yi Xian was almost seriously injured, which aroused the anger in his heart. The 3 avatars of the devil ape raised their heads and each let out a shocking roar and a tyrannical howl, followed by a loud bang, bang, bang. The fog avatar used spiritual suppression, causing the bodies of the 5 Stage 8 old monsters to tremble violently. At the same time, the violent ape waved the big-headed black stick in its hand repeatedly, smashing out with all its might. Remains the withered demon blood blade in the bone avatar's hand whistled out, transforming into an incomparably ferocious blood-colored withered demon. With a sinister smile, it swallowed an 8th Order survivor into its stomach. A shocking bloody battle unfolded, entering a state of frenzy. In just half an incense stick's worth of time, everything came to an end. Without exception, the 5 Stage 8 old monsters all died. Their bodies exploded, turning into a majestic mist of blood that was collected by Yi Xian. Including the treasures and weapons that fell from their bodies, as well as the top-grade cultivation resources such as the 9 Heavens Great Tao Treasure Liquid and the Heavenly Tao Origin Liquid, they all fell into Yi Xian's hands as spoils of war. Swish! When Yi Xian waved his hand and put away the 10-colored fireball that enveloped the entire battlefield and once again transformed into a 10-colored ribbon that wrapped around the body of the black fog, the cultivation aura emitted by the 3-headed, 6-armed devil ape True Devil Ape's body had shockingly increased once again, reaching the peak of the 9th stage perfection Grand Mist. Boom! At the same time, in the dark void far away on the right bank of the Milky Way, an earth-shattering rumble came, alarming everyone and causing them to turn around. At this moment, the giant nesting star that nurtured Yi Xian's avatar actually emitted an earth-shattering rumble, and the entire star shook violently. This was clearly a sign that the Chaos Demon God was about to be born. Walala, swish. The final battle in the sphere had come to an end. In less than 2 hours, the 8 powerful Grand Mist Stage 8 experts had been completely annihilated by Yi Xian. Long after this battle, Yi Xian's divine soul and physical body had once again reached a new height after stepping into the Grand Mist stage. It was enough to support him to use the 9 Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability to the 7th transformation. Before this battle, Yi Xian's peak strength was at the Grand Mist Stage 8 when he was in the 6th transformation. Now that this battle was over, he had already used the 9 Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability to the 9th transformation. Therefore, when the huge fireball collapsed and turned into a 10-colored sea of flames, it shrank to the extreme amidst the crackling sounds of flames. In the end, it turned back into a 10-colored ribbon that wrapped around the body of the Black Fog avatar. The cultivation aura of the 3-headed, 6-armed devil ape avatar had already reached the peak of the Grand Mist Stage 9. The peak of the Grand Mist stage was the strongest realm in the Grand Mist Void. After that was the Supreme Primal Chaos stage. Even in this ancient and vast primordial void, there hadn't been a single peak primordial 9th stage primordial void since the primordial epoch began. Even the 3,000 chaos demon gods that appeared at the beginning of each epoch were generally only mid-stage primordial void. Oh my god. Even the strongest chaos fiend god was at the Grand Mist stage 8 at most. At this moment, Yi Xian had used the 9 Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability to reach the peak of the Grand Mist stage 9. A level that no one had ever achieved in the boundless history of the Grand Mist stage. When his figure appeared, both sides of the boundless Milky Way fell into a deathly stillness. The 200-plus old monsters of the Grand Mist stage shook their heads and sighed with incomparable bitterness on their faces. They knew that they didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Even if they attacked together, they wouldn't be able to do anything to the master of the Magic Hall. Awu? All of you listen up, I am the pig tyrant of the Magic Hall. Whoever dares to stand out, this old pig will suppress them on the spot. It was also at this moment that the old pig spirit, who had long been unable to restrain himself, saw Yi Xian kill 8 Grand Mist Stage 8 experts by himself. After that battle, his own cultivation soared to the peak of the Grand Mist Stage 9. In this part of the Grand Mist Void, there was no one who could match him. The old pig spirit was instantly agitated. He raised his head and let out a long howl. He directly jumped out from the front of the Magic Hall's army and appeared in the sky above the central Milky Way. This This scene caused countless ferocious beasts and survivors to be speechless. The 200-plus seniors of the primordial chaos that possessed cultivations that far surpassed him seemed as if they'd eaten a dead fly, and all of them rolled their eyes, yet they didn't dare speak out despite feeling furious. Boom. At the same time, in the dark void far away from the right bank of the Milky Way, there was an earth-shattering roar. It alarmed everyone and they all looked back. At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the gigantic Origin Nest star that was nurturing Yi Xian's avatar. The entire star was violently shaking. This was clearly the sign that the Chaos Demon God was about to. The sign of his birth. Boom. Rumble. Boom. This wasn't the only exception. Similar scenes soon followed one after another. The vast and boundless primordial chaos world began to shake at this moment. In the dark void in the distance, the nesting stars were trembling violently, and there was the sound of heaven-shaking thunder resounding from within. No. The new Grey Mist era was about to begin, and the Chaos Demon God that was nurtured in these 3,000 nesting stars would also be born at that moment. To be precise, it should be 2,999 Chaos Demon Gods, because one of the nesting stars was swallowed by the Long Yi Hao, and it became the secret base camp of Yi Xian's Magic Hall Legion. Once these 2,999 Chaos Demon Gods were born, this vast and boundless Grand Mist Void would welcome the beginning of the new era, the Battle of the Demon Gods. It must be an extremely long, turbulent, and dark period. Yi Xian was not interested in participating. Until, his original body was not interested in this. Because, as far as he was concerned, this battle between the demon gods belonged to his avatars. It belonged to the generals under his command that were sent to the nests of the nests by Yi Xian as if they were stealing the heavens. In fact, there were many subordinates who were sent into the nesting stars by Yi Xian. Among them there was the Emperor Seal Thunder Spirit, Mosquito Butcher's original body, Shui Ben Elephant Fox Ferret, Ing Tai Li Mosquito Flying Centipede Old Monster Inji and so on. There was also the Primordial Porcupine, Primordial Hairy Tortoise, Green Ox, Yu Linglong Howling Moon Mastiff, Long Xiang, the Black-Robed Desolate Sovereign, Mingjiu Three-Clawed Flood Dragon, as well as Lang Ganglai, Ji Jinghong, Jin Haoyan, Jiao Ritian, Medusa, and Lion Bideo. There were also the Ferocious Beast Legion, the Blood Flood Dragon, the Green Rock, and the Battle Lion Race. There were a total of 98 of them. If his avatar and the Mad Mosquito Sovereign's original body that entered a nesting star before him were included, there would be a total of 100 of them. In the entire boundless primordial void, there were only 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods born in the 3,000 source hives at the beginning of each epoch. This time, there were only 2,999 of them, while Yi Xian's subordinates occupied 100 of them. Moreover, the strongest of all the Chaos Demon Gods, the Strength Demon God, was Yi Xian's avatar. Under his leadership, these 100 Chaos Demon Gods who succeeded in stealing the heavens would definitely win this battle of the Demon Gods at the beginning of the Grand Mist era and obtain a portion of the Grand Mist Providence. Everything would be fought for by his avatar. Yi Xian had already decided to bring the 6 Magic Hall Legions, Gui Hai Yi Dao, and the other subordinates of the Demon Gods in the Nesting Star Camp, and enter the Milky Way. No matter where the future path was or how far it was, the only thought in his mind now was, to go home. Everyone, the new Grand Mist era is about to begin, and the 3,000 Chaos Demon Gods will also be born. When that time comes, the Battle of the Demon Gods will begin. Retracting his gaze, Yi Xian turned to look at the countless experts on both sides of the Milky Way. In an instant, he withdrew his 3-headed, 6-armed demon ape avatar and returned to his original human form. I'll lead the Magic Hall Legions into the Milky Way and then seal the Vortex Tunnel. If you don't want to die in this battle of the Demon Gods, you'd better prepare early and find a place to cultivate in seclusion. Boom, boom, boom. After he finished speaking, an earth-shattering boom resounded in the void again. Yi Xian didn't care about anything else. With a wave of his hand, the 6 Magic Hall Legions in the Nesting Star Camp all started moving and rushed toward the Vortex Tunnel in the sky above the Milky Way Central Territory. Under his leadership, they entered the Milky Way.